The gods turned the world into a game, and 20 years later, only one human remained. Sehen explains that they had to kill to survive as soon as they received missions from the Game Master. They were controlled by the gods who watched everything, using their favorite humans as avatars. And so, the human race fell. Sehen lay on the ground thinking this was the worst game ever. In the end, it was ironic. There was only one hole in the sky to escape through. However, there was a rule. God avatars couldn't pass through the hole. So he was screwed because he was also an avatar. The gods probably ate popcorn and laughed at him. At that moment, the system's hack activated. When he drew his sword, the system confirmed that he had completed all missions by himself. Sehen, completely out of his mind, slashed his sword at the system. But when he turned the sword around, a screen appeared that surprised him. He had unlocked the DLC store. If you've ever played a game, you know that's completely broken. He stood up and saw that one package was available, the second chance. Sehen thought this was a wild card. He didn't know if it was real, but if it wasn't an illusion, he was sure he'd turn this game upside down. And so he bought the second chance package to change the game entirely and take revenge on the gods. He woke up lying on a park bench. The first thing he did was check the status window, but there was nothing. At that moment, a girl approached, calling for him. It was Han Jisoo, a close friend he had met in high school. Even though she was younger than him, Jisoo had always been good at taking care of others and had stayed by his side until the end. She asked if he had played all night because if he kept it up, his grades would drop terribly. Even so, she said that studying now didn't matter much. According to her, today was August 17th, the day everyone would be taken to the beginning of the game, where everything starts. Jisoo noticed that he was acting a bit slow and asked if he was okay. He of course just tried to hide it. She then commented that school would resume next week, while he felt grateful that she always cared about him. At that moment, a guy named Lee Jong-yun appeared. He was a jerk who had already hit on Jisoo without caring that Sehen was right there. This made our protagonist look like a mere third wheel. Observing the situation, Sehen thought there was a good chance this guy wouldn't even survive the next phase. Jisoo commented that he didn't have to leave just because of her, even though she hated encountering that guy. However, Sehen didn't care about it anymore since in his mind 10 years had passed. Suddenly, screams began to echo all around. A horde of goblins appeared. Some people, confused, thought they were watching a scene from a soap opera. Jisoo even wanted to see what was happening, but Sehen told her to stay where she was. He knew that 10 years ago, when he first saw these monsters beside her, the outcome was anything but good. Everyone around them ended up being sliced one by the bloodthirsty goblins. Desperation took over the crowd, and they began to flee. The goblins focused on chasing the weaker ones, because turning your back on them was basically asking for death. These monsters were just having fun, sending everyone back to the beginning. The situation became dangerous, and Sehen grabbed Jisoo to get them out of there. However, a goblin appeared right in front of them. Jisoo threw herself in front of him to protect him, while he remembered that during the first round, he had been paralyzed with fear, with the blood of others splattering on his body. At that time, he had left Jisoo behind and fled alone. This time, it would be different. He wasn't the same anymore. He was the player who had already seen the end of the world. With determination, he dodged and attacked the goblin. Grabbing a knife with agility, he charged at the monster, determined to change the story. When he managed to defeat the goblin, a new DLC was unlocked, and he received the bonus from the first phase, access to the community. He discovered that the points earned could increase his strength and even allow him to buy powerful items. It was part of the basic rules of this world, which now worked like a huge board game. By killing the goblin, he earned 300 points, which were added to the 700,000 points he had accumulated earlier. Sehen was impressed. He was like those wealthy nudes in RPG games who buy all the powerful items right at the start. At that moment, eyes began to appear in the sky, announcing that everyone was officially invited to the gods' game. From now on, everyone would be players who needed to complete missions. If they failed, they would receive punishments. For more information, they were instructed to consult the system's help. While the crowd down below tried to understand what was happening, Sehen was already thinking strategically. He knew that if he increased his abilities too quickly, he might attract the attention of the gods. Yet be careful, because they were monitoring everything. Those floating shapes in the sky were observers, the eyes of the gods and the game master. If he drew too much attention to himself, it could affect the difficulty of the missions. With this in mind, Sehen acted cautiously. Meanwhile, Jisoo commented that it was hard to understand, but this didn't seem like the reality they knew. She was right and surprisingly calm in the situation. However, Sehen seemed even more composed, especially after defeating the monsters with such ease. At that moment, the main mission appeared: escape from the college campus. The time limit was 2 days. Countless goblins would begin to attack the humans, and they would need to either flee or fight to survive. Each player would receive a different reward based on their achievements. Seeing this, Sehen thought it would be very easy. He called Jisoo to leave immediately, since the goblins were already starting to hunt the humans. The two ran through the woods with a pack of goblins chasing them. Further ahead, the two stopped to rest, and Jisoo asked about the other people. According to Sehen, everything would be fine since a goblin was similar to an adult man. If humans grouped together, it wouldn't be too hard to defeat them, at least until hobgoblins arrived. The place they arrived at was a safe zone. Sehan explained that in his first round he managed to crawl and run to safety, and by luck he made it there. Since it was a game, it made sense that there would be areas where monsters couldn't enter. The goblins could pass through the safe zone and eventually left. Jisoo was relieved to still be alive, but in Sehan's mind he was already thinking about how to equip Jisoo so she could fight, at least enough so she could take on a goblin by herself. Meanwhile, on another part of the campus, two guys were running from goblins. Jisoo arrived and with a knife managed to face and defeat the two monsters. This happened because 3 hours earlier Sehan had realized there were many eyes watching his every move. He knew that the only reason these lazy gods were observing him was for their own amusement. These beings chose their players and used them as avatars in the game, watching them as they completed missions. Additionally, there was the GM known as the Game Master, who was responsible for managing and sending out the missions. The GM of Korea had a personal observer named Akaters, who was right there in front of them. To blend in and seem useless, Stan lay down on the ground pretending to be exhausted until the observer moved away. Afterward, he took a look at the system. The sound was quite loud, but only he could see what was appearing. On the floating screen, it looked like an advanced computer. There was a kind of community used by the gods, with chat rooms and articles about players. Stan entered one of the chat rooms. Messages began popping up immediately. Some were asking who the anonymous person was, while others were discussing the importance of anonymity. Stan was impressed, as the gods were talking about the current situation and which players each of them was rooting for to win. It was time to check something else important. A huge screen appeared, showing various quality items. Unfortunately, some were still locked because missions had to be completed to unlock them. Looking further, Sehan found something called the Multiplayer Pack, a cube that allowed him to form a group with other people. It cost 20,000 points. Since he still had many points accumulated, he decided to buy it. Further ahead, he saw a group of people coming together and discussing how they could defeat the monsters. Then they charged at the goblins while Jisoo asked if they would stay there. In reality, they were already ready to move on. Jisoo sighed with relief, saying that she was starting to get hungry. Sehan thought it was strange because she seemed far too calm for the situation. Before they left, he gave her the knife he had taken earlier, explaining that she should use it to defend herself. Jisoo wondered if this was really the Sehan Appa she knew, but she thanked him anyway and promised to use the knife well. Additionally, he handed her a VIP brooch that increased regeneration speed and point gains. He mentioned that he had gotten the item after killing a goblin, but in reality, the brooch cost 10,000 points in the store. Though expensive, Sehan thought it was worth it because dying still meant the end of the game. He explained that in this kind of situation, paying for such a bonus was essential. When they left the safe zone, he asked Jisoo to focus on defense. Meanwhile, the gods were enjoying watching the humans die and begged for divine help. The god managing Korea commented that there was someone very skilled in the district. Returning to Sehan and Jisoo, they were on top of a building because Sehan had a plan. Jisoo went down to attract the goblins, while remembering what he had said. Where there is a large number of goblins, there is usually a leader guiding the group. That leader was likely the boss of the mission. If they didn't defeat him, escaping would be very difficult. Jisoo began running from the goblins, using a perfume of temptation, a potion that attracted weak monsters to the user. The plan was simple. Lure the goblins to one side, and just as she was about to be caught, use an invisibility potion and leave the rest to Sehan. However, just as she was about to use the potion, she saw two guys running below calling for help. Remembering what Sehan had said, she decided to act. Jisoo went down and killed the first goblin with a precise strike, leaving the two men stunned. They could hardly believe that a woman had come and faced the monster so decisively. Jisoo just told them, "Shut up and thank me," and continued on. But suddenly, her body began to feel strange and she started losing strength. Now the situation was critical because all the goblins were heading towards Sehan. Even so, Jisoo decided she wouldn't let that happen. Meanwhile, Sehan had found the secret boss of the phase. He thought, it's been about 10 years. At that moment, the monster looked at him with a threatening gaze and attacked with a powerful charge. Stan jumped over the monster, landing on its shoulder. He delivered a strong punch, destroying one of the boss's eyes, and immediately jumped back, knowing that the monster's sword wouldn't kill as many as it did the first time he faced something like that. With 10 strength points, Stan grabbed a rock and threw it at the boss. Taking advantage of the distraction, he used the monster's own sword to finish it off. Thus, he eliminated the secret boss of the phase, earning the Hobgoblin belt and 500 points as a reward. After the victory, Sehan checked his status, thinking he would only improve it when it was truly necessary. He knew the gods would soon discover that he had defeated the secret boss. Stan knew he needed to leave before the observer arrived. He started looking for Jisoo, but on the way encountered a group of goblins running in fear. Worried, he rushed to check if something bad had happened. Further ahead, Sehan found Jisoo in the middle of a pile of dead goblins. She had taken them all out by herself, using only her knife. A few minutes earlier, while the goblins were returning to get him, Jisoo had arrived, striking quickly and decisively. When Sam caught up to her, she fell to her knees, relieved, saying that she had found 2 humans while luring the monsters. She explained that when she saw them, they were fine, but in the middle of the slaughter, the 2 of them ended up falling down below. They probably fainted from fear, or maybe it was her fault, Jisoo thought. Curious, Sen asked to see her status window. Upon analyzing it, he was impressed. She had an extremely rare ability, Chun Salsion, a passive skill of S rank. Sehan had seen something like this before, the being called Hyoma, from another world where martial arts existed, had the same skill. He was the strongest person in his dimension. Now it all made sense. The goblins had fooled because of the fear-inducing effect of this ability. However, even though it was an amazing skill. There was a risk of losing consciousness if the power was not controlled. Seihan realized he would need to take good care of Jisoo to prevent her from losing control. Jisoo asked what exactly that skill was. Seihan explained that basically the more blood she saw, the stronger she became. He mentioned that it was strange because just seeing blood made her eyes turn red. He warned her that it could be dangerous to use this ability without control. Still, he acknowledged that starting with such a powerful skill was a great asset. Stan then asked if she would make a contract with him. Jisoo, a bit confused, wanted to know what kind of contract this was. He clarified that it was nothing serious. Why was she blushing so much? What he really wanted was to form a party with her since he had bought the group pack. Thus, Jisoo became the first member of Seihan's party. At the moment, there were no shareable abilities, but Seihan started thinking about the possibility. He knew of a skill that would fit perfectly with Jisoo, and it would help her improve the use of her blood ability. Meanwhile, he noticed creatures floating around them. He decided to call Jisoo to continue the mission. At that moment, the two students who had fainted started to wake up completely frightened. Stan got straight to the point, asking what they were doing there. One of them replied with some arrogance, asking what a nerdy idiot had to do with the situation. Before he could continue, Jisoo approached with her knife and ordered him to speak up. After a few good slaps, the student was finally ready to answer. He explained that he had been exploring the area with another colleague. The plan was simple. If one of them died, the other should run to warn the group about the dangers. This meant that a leader was already emerging among the students. In fact, all the riskier tasks had been decided by a lottery, and that was how he ended up there. With this, Sen began to think that someone was gathering people to fight. If it was someone capable of bringing together people in a panic, it could only be a smart person with leadership skills. That's why he ordered the student to take them to this leader. The guy, however, tried to stand up to Seihan. At that moment, a goblin appeared next to them, and Seihan easily knocked it down. He explained that there was something interesting about goblins. In a fight, they always eliminate the weakest first. With that, he made it clear to the student that he had two options: cooperate or deal with the goblins alone. After some time walking, they arrived at the gym, where many had taken refuge. The place was filled with the wounded who had been attacked in the first wave. The person who organized this group could only be someone popular and influential. There he was, the student president of the college, Yoon-hyun. Handsome, intelligent, and with leadership skills, Yoon was standing out, taking charge of the situation. Seihan recognized that, at least for now, he would be treated as a rare avatar, even though in another timeline he had died in the first round. Most of the people there had no idea that they were doomed. This meant that Yoon-hyun had not yet become the avatar of any god. However, with so many observers around, he had probably already received some kind of invitation. The question now was whether he would trust the gods and accept becoming an avatar, as this would bring many benefits. At that moment, Yoon asked if the two who had fainted had returned safely. Seihan stepped forward, explaining that the most important thing was that everyone should leave immediately. The monster leader was dead, which had left the goblins confused. It was the perfect opportunity to escape from the campus. Stan warned that there was a time limit on the mission window and the deadline was almost over. He also mentioned that the reality there seemed manipulated, as if someone had thrown them all into a game and was simply watching eating popcorn. Yoon found the comment strange and asked how Seihan knew that. Seihan, however, avoided telling the truth as there were too many eyes observing the place. Whoever they were, these gods didn't seem interested in the survival of the humans there. Since Yoon was not yet an avatar, the priority was to convince him to leave quickly. Since the secret boss had been defeated, the gods would likely start to get bored, meaning they could send new, unexpected missions. For Seihan, the most important thing in this insane game was understanding and predicting the gods' actions. Finally, Yoon understood that the main objective of this mission was to escape. He himself had already realized that there was no way to contact the outside world. Observing Yoon's reasoning, Seihan was surprised. How could someone with such intelligence have died in the first round? Stan remembered that in his other timeline he had heard that nothing went wrong in the gym, but still, everyone there was massacred by the secret boss. Initially, he thought the leader was a coward, but now he saw that it wasn't the case at all. While Seihan reflected, another guy interrupted, suggesting that the best option was to wait for rescue. He argued that running away would be suicide. This was Park Dong-won, nicknamed Bat. Seihan remembered him well because, in his other life, Park Dong-won had caused a lot of problems. Meanwhile, President Yoon tried to argue that action was necessary, but Park retorted, saying that Yoon was risking everyone's life on a simple bet. While Seihan was surprised, he realized that he didn't know the guy was from his college. He quickly understood what was happening. That guy had probably become the avatar of a god. The guy started claiming that Seihan was talking nonsense, saying that he just wanted to risk everyone's life for no reason. Two idiots killed a goblin and now they think they know everything, he exclaimed. According to him, those monsters were beyond human understanding and escaping without weapons was impossible. Therefore, the most sensible plan would be to wait for the police or the army for everyone's safety. But Seihan knew it was all a lie. He clearly remembered who that psychopath was. The guy used to circulate among groups, creating intrigue until people destroyed each other. He wore a mask of humanity, but he was nothing more than a manipulative scumbag. Jisoo then asked if he had seen how they killed the goblins. He, not understanding anything, repeated, "Goblin." She explained that the monsters outside had names that appeared above their heads when they were killed, and that's why it was foolish to wait for rescue, since there was no contact with the outside world. The stubborn guy retorted, saying that no one would accept leaving. Sehun coldly replied that, in that case, everyone could just die right there. It didn't matter to him. This was Sehun's attempt to break the bat's game, knowing that his true goal was to cause as many deaths as possible to gain a proportional reward. The student council representative decided to go with Sehun. This forced Bat to follow the group as well, even though he didn't want to. For Sehun, this only strengthened his certainty that Bat was the avatar of a god. Meanwhile, some older members of the group started questioning whether it was safe to leave, given the monsters outside. The reconnaissance group had reported that the monsters were confused since their leader was killed. One of them, irritated, mocked, "Oh, are you going to lead everyone into this mess, bastard? Don't expect to earn any academic points for this." Sehun responded impatiently, "Who's thinking about academic points here, you old bastard?" With everyone ready, the group finally left the gym. Jisoo, worried, asked if everything was okay. Sehun assured her that the goblins wouldn't attack as long as they were in a large group. Therefore, even with Bat among them, it would be better to keep him alive for now since he might still be useful later. The group continued moving forward and soon reached the main gate. At that moment, a new screen appeared, indicating that the mission's difficulty would increase. An earthquake occurred, and from it emerged a sentinel minotaur. Stating that, Sehun was incredulous. They're crazy putting this in the first mission. This kind of monster only appears around the 15th mission. He knew that the Hobgoblin, which was expected, could be easily defeated if normal players teamed up, but a sentinel was a whole different story that turned the mission into a game event designed to fail. To Sehun, it was clear that the gods just wanted to massacre the people in that place. However, since it was the first mission, the sentinel would probably have its strength limited and couldn't use abilities higher than rank F. Bat, desperate, screamed, "Everyone, run." Right away, Jisoo slapped Bat, telling him to shut up. She explained that they couldn't run because if they did, the Minotaur would chase them. Even so, some idiots tried to flee and the monster roared, applying a fear effect. The first one to run was crushed by a stomp. An old man also ended up dying while the Minotaur roared frantically. The student council representative was shocked, noticing that the monster was more than 5 meters tall. He started questioning whether running away had been a good idea, considering the sudden increase in difficulty. Sehun decided that he would be the bait, distracting the monster so everyone could escape. He stated that no one but him could do this, and the president was impressed by the calmness and clarity of thought Sehun showed even in the midst of that situation. Sehun grabbed a red cloth and said it was time to play the bull and the matador. At his signal, everyone started running while he waved the cloth to attract the Minotaur. The plan worked, and the monster focused all of its attention on Sehun. While the group ran toward the gate, the president continued to be impressed by Sehun, who skillfully dodged all the monster's attacks. As soon as they passed through the gate, the first main mission was completed. On the other side, the president ordered the others to check if everyone was okay, but soon realized they couldn't return due to a blue barrier. He shouted for Sehun to run, but before he could react, Sehun took a massive punch and was thrown to the ground. The group assumed Sehun had died and moved on. However, deep down, Sehun was still alive. He stretched calmly, aware that surviving alone wasn't enough. He knew it was time to truly fight against that cow. Before taking the blow, Sehun had increased his resistance attribute by 94 points, reaching the same level as the Minotaur. He knew that his sentinel was made to be invincible, and in his past life, he had always run away or sacrificed others to survive. This time, however, it would be different. The Minotaur attacked again, but Sehun grabbed the monster's horns. With an increase of 83 points in strength, he reached the limit allowed for that mission. Additionally, he wore the Hobgoblin belt, which added 10 extra strength points beyond the limit. With his strength surpassing that of the Minotaur, Sehun broke one of its horns. He thought that in his past life, he would never have done something like that, as he was just a cruel loner. But now with the second chance, he was determined to become a true hero. After landing a series of powerful blows, Sehun defeated the Minotaur. The mission was completed, and he reached the platinum rank. According to Sehun, this was the highest rank possible in a mission, and he began to wonder what kind of reward he would receive. As he exited through the gate, Sehun found only Jisoo waiting for him. Everyone else had left believing he had died, but Jisoo knew he would be fine as she could see the status of the other group members. When he took the punch, his health bar didn't even drop much. Jisoo, who had been waiting for him, explained that she didn't want to draw attention and asked which rank he had received. Sehun replied that he was at platinum rank, while Jisoo was at gold rank just below him. The gold rank was considered excellent as platinum was extremely rare and hard to achieve. The system then delivered the rewards, the achievement sacrifice for defeating the secret boss and the sentinel. As prizes, Sehun received a compact orichalcum, the end of time ability, growth type, and a healing ability, also growth type, in addition to 1,000 extra points. He was impressed by the first item and the growth type abilities, which were very hard to obtain. However, he felt a slight disappointment for not having received any rank S abilities. Jisoo asked if he had seen the message about the second main mission. The new mission was to go to the World Tower in Rome and defeat the main boss within 14 days. To Sehun, this was a familiar mission as he had faced something similar before. He concluded that everyone else was probably already on their way to the tower and asked why Jisoo hadn't gone with them. She explained that she didn't like crowded places and was suspicious of Bat, who seemed very suspicious. The more Sehun observed Jisoo, the more he noticed how skilled she was. He thought that if she hadn't died so early in his past life, she would probably have become an extremely famous player. They decided not to go directly to the tower since they still had 2 weeks to meet the deadline. Seihan asked if Jisoo had accepted to be avatar of any god, but she replied that she had rejected all 12 requests she had received. She didn't want to be controlled by someone she didn't know. Moreover, being very rational, it seemed that her abilities had not yet been affected by madness. Since they were together on this journey, Seihan promised to help Jisoo become as strong as a god's avatar. The first skill they would train would be the Berserker's Celestial Blood technique. This was a skill that Seihan had never been able to master in his past life. Despite acquiring great knowledge in martial arts and fighting with demon blood, he lacked the appropriate physicality of the celestial assassin to learn this technique. Now, even though he was helping Jisoo, she was evolving at an insane pace. 2 hours earlier, Seihan had been facing several enemies, and when one attacked him unexpectedly, he landed a perfect strike. Realizing how powerful the combination of the healing skill with other effects was, he then asked if the points were being shared correctly. Jisoo confirmed, excited because the brute she wore increased the points earned by 20%. With the trading finished, Seihan decided to test the functionality of sharing skills. The system notified that the sharing had been initiated. The shared skills were healing and celestial assassin physique. However, a message appeared indicating that the shared skills would only have 30% of their initial effectiveness, with the possibility of reaching 80% as the bond between the group members deepened. Jisoo remarked that the shared skills were good, but lamented that none of them were offensive. Seihan explained that, in fact, healing was a powerful offensive skill because it could work strategically as an excellent offensive tool. To better understand, imagine any attack. A normal person would try to dodge, but since you have absurd recovery, this is unnecessary. The time and energy someone would use to dodge can instead be devoted to the attack. In other words, the healing skill not only recovers wounds, but also affects your resistance and physical strength. After such an incredible explanation, Jisoo was impressed with the skill. Since they still had plenty of time, they decided to master a new technique before entering the arena. Seihan suggested granting another skill without directly sharing it within the group. Jisoo, intrigued, asked what had happened to him to become so focused, since he was never the type to care about others. Returning to the training, Jisoo continued practicing that intense technique while Seihan connected to the community of the gods. In the chat, people seemed to be having a lot of fun with the game. Seihan recognized one of the participants by the name Honest Life. He knew that any god using this nickname was, in fact, the opposite of honest and suspected that it was the god of the treacherous bat. Irritated, he deduced that this god's plans were probably not going as expected. Meanwhile, another god complained that his avatar was so dumb that he was trying to rob a bank. Using the anonymity of Anonymous 48, Seihan made a joke about the situation, asking if he could watch too. At that moment, Jester sent him an invite to enter the channel room of his personal observer. Inside the room, there was a little girl hiding and a police officer arrived asking if she was okay. It was then that Seihan found something essential, the so-called access card, necessary to defeat the monster at the Tower of Rome. After that, Seihan and Jisoo walked through the city, observing the damage caused by the monsters, who clearly had no interest in civilization. Jisoo commented that there was no more police or army, and that because of that, the world they knew had been destroyed. At that moment, a monster appeared and attacked Jisoo, but she landed a perfect blow to its head, complaining that the bastard was spilling too much blood. It didn't even seem like just a day ago the world was peacefully normal. While cleaning her blade, Jisoo commented that she had gone blind and questioned how they could kill monsters that way. However, thanks to her skill, it was possible to deal extra damage, and considering that they were still in the first stage, she was already very strong. After that, they decided to go somewhere else, a bank. Jisoo, confused, asked if they had come there to withdraw money, but Seihan explained that in this world, money had no value. Their goal was to find a person essential for the second stage. Inside the bank, a police officer was fighting some bandits. Even with the chaotic situation, he managed to take down the enemies one by one. The scene ended quickly, but Jisoo was impressed, commenting that the man must have some special item. However, Seihan knew that the man was, in fact, the avatar of a god. Noticing their presence, the officer approached, warning them that the area was dangerous because the thieves kept appearing all the time. Actually, they hadn't come to the bank to hide. They had come to meet Yuana. The guy said, "It's the first time I've heard that name, since his name was Kyon Chil." Then, out of nowhere, Jisoo grabbed his arm, saying that his pulse was quite agitated and that he must be very surprised by what he had just heard. Surely this woman's intuition is very good, right? Now he began asking who they were. Actually, this person was not very good at acting, and also the one there is the observer of the silly god of the court who likes fun situations. That's why San told him to show his skill. Actually, she even managed to do something like a weak person before taking the body of that police officer. It was a perfect plan, but Seihan just messed up that plan. So she wanted to know what he wanted, since she was busy. "Ah, robbing a bank and busy now, huh?" said Jisoo, while asking if that was some transformation skill. The truth was, this girl could transform into another person or even an object. Jisoo then asked why he was robbing the bank if he was trying to help people. And in fact, she was helping people, but it was she who brought those thieves. She knew she wouldn't be able to steal all the money with so many people around. and that way, she could take everything for herself. In reality, this girl, along with the bat, is the best at deceiving people. What Sehen wants is for her to come with them until they complete the second mission. Hearing this, she became all excited because she was on the third mission and asked how many monsters he had killed, but he just wanted her answer, yes or no. She then replied, "Oh, I don't want to either." Sehen then said he would give points in exchange for a partnership, but that she shouldn't have too many points since she was on the second mission. Since he was fed up, he gave her a flick on the nuts, telling her she should be more respectful. Then she came with a punch, but Jisoo stopped her blow and she couldn't get out no matter what. Meanwhile, Jisoo realized that she couldn't transform when she lost focus due to pain, so she asked her to show a little more respect. Now it seems like we have a new companion. As they walked down the street, she asked if they were also avatars, but the truth is, here it's pure strength. What really matters is your equipment. You need items to equalize stats and progress. Jisoo then asked how they were going to get equipment. The answer was simple, by entering a safe zone in a store. Sehen opened a point of purchase. The two were surprised since they had never seen this before, and even that girl's goddess hadn't told her how to do this. This goddess is the court fool, known for having a sadistic personality, which is why she would never show her avatars how to do things. So Sehen only found this out by coincidence, right? Now they needed to get the equipment they'd need for this stage. As he thought, most items were common and had no special effects, since soon players would be able to craft their own items. But right now, the only way to get equipment is by buying it from this machine. That's why he started by getting a defensive item for Jisoo, purchasing it because the dad here was loaded. Then he asked what kind of weapon she wanted. In fact, there were several types she could choose from, but what she would want at the beginning is a heavy weapon, a mace. Meanwhile, she asked if anyone wanted to buy anything for her. Since she rejected the offer to earn points, she could sit and cry, as he said each item costs 200 points. If she hadn't been robbing banks, she'd probably have earned more points by now. Then a Clayton came rushing in, but Sehen slashed him, piercing him all the way through the wall. He was testing how orichalcum worked on the sword, since this was a very powerful metal that could be used to coat weapons or items both in liquid and solid form. All it took was rubbing it on the sword for it to be fully coated. At this point, Jisoo said they had arrived at the Tower of Rome. Seeing the giant structure, the girl asked what their second mission was. Since it was to capture the boss, he was surprised because her mission was just to survive. If it's about surviving, Sehen could understand, since this mission was about killing or being killed until a certain number of players were left. Compared to the mission they received, this one was pretty peaceful, as everyone would be massacred by the boss and the sentinel if it weren't for Sehen. They stopped when they noticed someone hiding behind the wall, but upon taking a closer look behind the walls, the guys were on guard, raising a barrier. But not for monsters, just for wandering humans. So Sehen had the other girl transform and see if there was any information. Seeing the two of them in this way, there was no way she could refuse. She jumped to the side, and when the guy passed by, she gave him a light slap, putting him asleep. She used the transformation, blending in with the other guy who came to check on the strange noise. Inside, they were talking about how they had reached the last floor and would probably defeat the boss. Then in front of them, they saw the boss of the second stage, and just by opening its eyes, it made everyone tremble and crushed all the players as they tried to flee. It was said that the boss of the stage was at the top of this building, and the entrance to the boss's hall was complicated. You could only enter with people who completed the first stage with you. In the end, there would be a boss and two teams trying to kill it, but only one team could complete the mission. Plus, there would be punishment if you failed. That's why the team arriving later takes care of the gate. Inside, they ended up meeting that idiot who was still the same. At least he was much more respectful than the last time. But now Sehen wanted to see the president. Showing them the way, he said this was their base, meaning there were a lot of observers here. Even the girl from their team asked what he had done in the last stage to get everyone looking at him like that. But the truth was, he had gotten rid of his sentinel while the others escaped, and she was surprised, asking if that was really true. Just then, the president rushed in, asking if he was okay. There was even a little moment for a hug. Then he started explaining that he was protecting this place because they arrived later and that the other team was much stronger than theirs. And Sehen solved the problem, saying there was a way to take down the bastards who wanted everything. To recap, there's a boss inside the tower and two teams are eyeing it. The team that doesn't kill it will receive a punishment, death itself. Sehen said that the president had mentioned that they were the only ones who said the boss was on the highest floor of the tower. So if that's the case, will they just surrender and let the fools try first? The president thought it was a joke, but in reality, they could take the boss on the last floor if that guy on top was the real boss. Then the president said that from the video, it really was the boss, a monster so strong that its gaze alone was terrifying. When he entered the tower, he also got the boss stage screen. They even inspected the other floors, but couldn't find any other monsters as strong as that one. Then Sehen asked if they went to the basement of Rome. He said that there's a big difference between a boss and a common monster because a boss creates its own army and positions itself near them. Meanwhile, the guys up top had one of them calling for help since those bastards were here. Even that scum decided to join them. While the president said those attacking were all criminals, they had been in guilds in Korea since the first stage. But aside from them, there was one that drew a lot of attention because it was formed by criminals who escaped from prison as soon as the world changed. A guild that kills people like insects for their benefit and did everything to advance. The Sin Guild. And the man who created this guild is none other than Kim Jun-won, who asked if they had come to fight. In fact, the president was there today because they had come to a conclusion. They decided their group could attack the boss's room first. But for him, those insects weren't doing anything since, if they didn't back back down, they'd die anyway. Then the president said that since they had no chance of winning, they would find another solution, because if he killed the boss first, another one could appear in a certain amount of time. The big guy just came down and said that if they were planning something, they'd end up dying. While Sehan thought that guy was an avatar of superior god Hades, he accepted being like that but wouldn't blindly trust them. That's why the president said he'd stay there until the end. But the cocky guy said he was the leader, so the bat would stay in his place, and hearing this they knew something bad was coming. Then the muscular guy said everyone would stay and came at them with his chains, but Sehan blocked easily. When the president asked what that was, the response was simply that Sehan was very skilled. But it's better if this guy stays in line, or he'll end up looking for trouble with them. Because when he looked at Jisoo, he was already scared, wondering what that was. And so the cowardly guy ended up agreeing to the bat staying. Now isn't the time to be a coward because there's a lot to be done. After that, Sehan introduced the good little shop to the group while he chatted with the president. Then he was talking on the phone saying he'd leave the other side to her. Out of nowhere, Jisoo appeared asking what he was doing. Here were the equipment they would use in the attack. A spear and rings where you can adjust the weight depending on the color of the gem. According to Jisoo, she only needed the standard defense equipment and her beautiful mace, while asking if he knew how to use his spear. In fact, he could use any type of weapon, since between surviving and gaining talent, it wasn't necessary. He was the one who overcame the strongest, the best, and survived alone. But this time, maybe he would receive the title of the strongest. Then ahead, he mentioned that the president had provided good equipment, and it seemed he had also become an avatar. Since the president probably wasn't an evil god, this time he came to inform them that everyone was ready. He then gave the spear to the president, saying to place it in the center of the room when they find the boss, because it would make it easier to pierce the floor when placed. So all they needed to do was lure the boss toward the spear. He, not understanding, ended up agreeing. Now going back to the bat, he saw the message in the group that they were heading down to the basement, wondering what that scumbag did, since even his god told him to be cautious with him. At this point, he stood up, knocking on the door because he had something to say to the boss. The guard took the idiot, who ended up spilling everything about the secret mission his team was carrying out. Down in the basement, they were hunting monsters in search of the true boss. They brought torches, as advised by Sehan, because the monsters came from the darkness. He then dealt a blow to the scummy rat, saying their numbers were increasing for no reason. Now they had already walked about halfway. They were on the 3rd floor of the basement, which had a total of 6. Then a message came from the bank robber saying they were descending. Going back to the gang guy, he was pissed, punching the wall. At this point, the guy brought the bat, who had something to say. He then spilled the beans about the passage in the basement. That's why they gave up on the last floor. That's why he called all the men, because they were going after the worms. But outside the building, there was no one. So everyone scattered to search. One of them even said they might have run to the last floor to finish the stage faster. Then they went down to the basement. But ahead, 2 people were blocking the way. Sehan started by saying they were taking too long and that he knew the scumbag bat would rat them out. The bastard even tried to say that this was the end of the line for him, while the other infiltrator de-transformed because she was working undercover, unseen. This was the perfect plan to gather everyone and take them all out at once. And since they were running out of time, Jisoo said she could hold them all off on her own. So Sehan grabbed the thief because they were moving on to the next stage of the plan. Before leaving, he told Jisoo to tie up that cowardly scumbag, as they were going to have a little chat. The guy tried to stop Sehan from leaving, but Sehan threw a punch, sending everyone back. Now, their beloved Yandir and her mace were going to have some fun. The persistent guy still sent his men after him, but one by one, they were knocked down because absolutely no one was going to leave this place. The guy could already tell by the look in her eyes that she saw them as nothing but insects. So he ordered everyone to attack her, and she calmly took them all down. The men came from behind, but they took a hit to the face, and in no time, she was taking out the leader's men. He thought he was superior to the woman because he was the avatar of Hades, and thus he used the death sentence ability, a skill that, if it hit, would kill the target in a minute. However, it didn't work on targets who were a higher level, so he prepared and went after Jisoo. But at that moment, he took a hammering from the mace, and his balls went flying. Meanwhile, the thief asked Sehan if Jisoo would be okay, and there was no need to say anything about that, right? Because even though they were strong opposites, Jisoo was far superior. Also, the avatar from earlier probably only had one skill from his god. Now they were heading to the roof to face the next monster. The thief asked Sehan if he could really defeat this monster, but that's why he brought her here, and he asked if she had learned what he had said earlier. And since she had, he was going to buy her an item worth at least 2,000 points. So now she was supposed to transform into what he had told her earlier, a weasel. And even though she transformed, she asked if this would help in any way. But he reassured her, saying when the time came, she would understand. Inside, there was a mess of humans who had been torn apart and turned into statues because of the evil eye. So now the weasel thief had to find where the creature was hiding inside, and jumping, she went on her way. Meanwhile, Sehan saw the creature, which was enormous, the sentry of this stage, who introduced itself as Orga, because another fool had arrived. Unlike the Minotaur from the first mission, this scumbag had a name. That meant it was a named monster ruling this stage, with the configuration that no player could surpass it. A true sentry who possessed the evil eye of petrification, where anything living that came into contact with its gaze turned to stone. So it told the thief that now was the time to do what he had told her, and since she didn't want to go, maybe he should throw her at it. The weasel went for it, and Sehan, on the other side, had to be careful of the creature's eyes. But the creature just said that he was smarter than he looked, and how this ended would depend on their weasel thief. The creature itself asked why this weasel wasn't affected by its ability, but Sehan said that according to folklore, one of the natural enemies of the basilisk was the weasel, the champion's weakness, and hearing this, the creature swung its club, saying that it wouldn't work. Then the weasel climbed on it, and it tried to use its eyes, but once again, it didn't work. It went after Sehan, who was on the side, and at that moment, the thief finally shone. She bit the creature right in the eye. Then Sehan grabbed her while the beast came charging angrily, and he dodged by jumping, because due to its huge body, its attacks were quite easy to avoid. At that moment, during the rush, the president's message arrived, and since it was time to execute the plan, they separated. The big guy thought it was fun, because nothing he did could stop him, and he came forward with his massive paw, since that was the difference in skill between them. But the problem was that this crazy beast talked too much. So Sehan snapped his fingers, and a chicken seemed to crow, while the beast screamed like crazy. Sehan started cutting from all sides, with the beast saying that he wasn't strong enough to pierce its scales and would just die from exhaustion. Then standing still, Sehan said that, as he mentioned, it was impossible to kill a monster like this, and that's why he thought of different ways to kill a sentinel like it, because from his previous life he was used to facing an opponent he couldn't defeat. Even though skills, status, and unique traits are important, he had none of those in his first round, since the last man standing wasn't the strongest or the smartest, but it was himself, and that's why anything is possible if you have experience and patience. But the beast screamed that this was nonsense, and that it would be the end for him. Just then, the whole Roman tower exploded because in reality, Sehan's plan was to plant bombs all over the tower. That's why he wasn't just running around inside for no reason. He had actually placed weight bracelets around the beast's arms. So Sehan started increasing the weight, talking about the difference in skill. And also, goodbye, little beast who fell through the Roman tower, thinking it would survive the fall and kill this human. The problem was that down below, there was a well-placed golden spear where the beast would fall. It went hit the ground, the spear pierced right through it. Then, going back a few minutes earlier, the president and his group were facing the final boss, but they had a serious problem. No one could finish off this monster, and if the fight went on much longer, they'd be in trouble. Just then, our big beast came falling from above, crushing the boss, who was defeated and killed by the well-positioned spear, and in that way, they completed the main mission. Our president finished for the silver rank. Another screen appeared, saying that from the third mission onwards, stages would be activated after a certain amount of time passed or when certain conditions were met. This meant that no one knew when the third mission would begin, until Sehan showed up, asking if everyone was safe, because it seemed he had dropped the beast exactly where the spear was. The president was amazed because he had dropped such a huge beast and yet had no injuries on his body, and he said that thanks to him, they all succeeded. But on the other hand, it would have been different if it had been the criminals, because according to the president, they were skilled enough to kill the spectator, and that's why they must also become stronger and survive on their own. Since they had some time before the third stage, Sehan was going to take a trip to a few places. The president asked where, and Sehan replied, "Wherever fate leads us," and he told him to call if anything important happened. He also said that whenever they needed him, just give him a call. Then Sehan started saying goodbye because the president and the others must have realized how weak they were. Now, they needed to survive on their own at least until the 7th mission. Then at the store, Jisoo said he had taken longer than she expected, and now she had also changed her weapon because the durability of the other one had been destroyed. She asked about that guy. Actually, he was right there, tied up, and when she looked, Sehan had already approached, asking what that was on his neck. And of course, it wasn't anything important, just an interesting choker, which by increasing the weight, made the guy slam his face into the ground. He asked if a player could handle 200 kilograms easily, and he increased the weight, while the guy asked what the hell he did to be treated like this. Actually, during the first mission, he was going to kill everyone after gathering them in the auditorium. Plus, he had betrayed them again with the guy with the chain, without even knowing that the thief had been watching him the whole time. And even though he failed, if it hadn't been for Sehan, his plan would have succeeded. And that's why this thing on his neck was a physical restriction. Now, Sehan imposed a mental restriction, an absolute contract for him to sign with the understanding that he would never violate the terms. In other words, if he broke the rules, the choker would tighten around his neck and his head would explode. And seeing the pissed off girl behind him, he knew he had no choice but to sign it. And as he did so, he gave a wave to our bat, because from now on, he knew every move he made. And since they had completed the second mission, Jisoo must have earned points for sharing the party. She asked where he was going. Since he was going to visit a few places, she also had a few to go to. And since they were members of the same group, they could see each other's location through the group system. She also said she would give him the rewards the thief wanted. Then he gave her the secret ring, an item capable of completely hiding the user for 1 hour, usable once a day. With this, she became excited, asking if he was really serious. Sehan also said he would give her something next time they met. Now that everything was done, it was time to move on. Jisoo asked where he was going, and in fact, he was going to farm a bit. Since there were many observers around, it was likely that the gods were paying attention to him. He also also asked why this thief was following him, since those were also the observers who followed her. Anyway, he wanted to know the reason she came along with him. And according to our favorite thief, they had spent a good amount of time together, and since he was skilled, she wanted to join him. But not to be a burden, she could help with anything. Then two guys appeared ahead, asking what they were doing there. They were attacking this dungeon and were told to leave quickly while they were being nice. Se-han just casually walked away, since as they found the place, it was going to be here. The girl even asked how he planned to deal with the guys at the door, because they were probably surrounding the whole dungeon to prevent anyone from entering. He replied that there wasn't just one way, all they had to do was create a new one. While the honest life god was complaining that someone was messing with his avatar, the court jester started laughing, saying that he didn't know anything about him. The reason for this bravery was that Se-han hadn't allowed the bat to do anything bad so far. Se-han had found this dungeon just now because those bastards had been talking about it in the chat. He started thinking about where this dungeon was located. So he used the Explorer skill here below, as it explores a 50-meter radius. He kept doing this in all places until he found the right one. The girl, tired of asking why they were doing this, finally discovered that, in fact, below was the boss room of that dungeon the guys hadn't allowed anyone to enter. Since it was 20 meters underground, she wanted to know how they were going to get there because dungeons were protected by special magic. So forcing their way in wasn't an option. Then Se-han took out a dungeon drilling tool from his pocket, an item that can alter the terrain of a dungeon, and with the tool coated, he began drilling straight into the ground toward the boss room. While the girl asked how long this would take, he replied that it would be about 2 hours of digging. 5 hours later, everything started cracking, and they ended up in the deepest part of the dungeon, the boss hall, facing the praying mantis and its army. Then Se-han asked if she was fine dealing with the smaller ones, and since she was good to go, he headed straight for the boss, using the lance with the coating, boosting his stats. Then one of the creatures came at him, and he just raised the lance, finishing it off. Because against these creatures, all you needed to do was watch out for their blades and focus on their weak spots. So he crushed a bunch of them, and then faced the boss of the hall, saying that the praying mantises were easy because they were predictable. When he attacked, Se-han just threw the lance, making a donut-shaped hole in the beast, finishing off the dungeon boss. And since he was the first, rewards started pouring in, including the title, "I want this if I'm not the first." Additionally, he received the skills Magic Stone and Fatal Sting, and there were even more rewards for clearing the dungeon. Then they repelled out, and 4 days later, that group finally arrived at the boss hall, and they were like, "We're going to be the first to get this." When they opened the door, the room was empty, and on the wall was the famous "You lost, loser," because the bastards had left through the ceiling. Then Se-han entered the community as anonymous, while the long-haired god was pissed because someone had cleared the dungeon his avatar was cleaning in the biggest fail. Guess who it was, right? The Joker didn't even think, cracking up about it, until Se-han arrived, saying that maybe he had a good dungeon for him. The long-haired guy immediately got excited, asking where. Then Se-han showed on the map that it was near the Gyode station, and from what he knew, it would only have rank C items. The Joker said that since this was the third time Se-han had been right, the information was probably valid, and of course our guy here had his schemes. One of the gods asked if he was a god of prediction, but there was that anonymity thing, right? No one could know each other's identity. They tried and tried, but in the end, it led nowhere. Meanwhile, the long-haired guy left, saying his avatar would wipe out everyone. As a result, all the avatars in the area were drawn to another place. The girl even asked where they were going because her goddess had mentioned there was one near Gyode station. In reality, it was just a decoy, right, partners? Because the plan was different. She asked why, but he said they had to complete the third mission, even though there was no time limit, since if the fourth mission started, they would be screwed. But before heading there, they needed to grab a skill. She has always tried to figure out what else he knew, but knew he wouldn't tell her. And the big guy changed the subject, talking about the stars because the sky was so beautiful, even with the world ending. And in the place they were about to enter, some special things were needed. And even though it was ugly, like she said, it would protect them from arrows and attacks. Since it was so quiet down below, she asked if it was really a dungeon, and said that he should have at least brought a torch. Actually, there was a reason he didn't bring anything other than the scarf. So they kept walking with the girl complaining, until he realized they were coming. And right then, the scarf blocked an arrow, as it was made from a protective fabric that could block 5 long-range attacks. Finally, she saw how impressive it really was, and since there was darkness and arrows flying, they were in the right place. He told the girl to look for any openings while being careful not to get hit by arrows, and when she got the signal, she knew what to do. Then Se-han used a tracking line, a skill that extends to the owner of the object to which the line is attached. The line flew and they finally found it. Se-han appeared next to the archer, and the one attacking was the Assassin of Moonless Nights, a monster that moves quickly in the dark. Like Tamama, the scarf has 3 more uses. As he ran after the creature, just missing a shot, Se-han jumped up while descending. Meanwhile, the creature laughed like a maniac. But one thing it didn't realize, because it's common in games for there to be animals in dungeons, was that what was coming from above was their little bat, the girl, using a light flare, blinding the opponent for 10 seconds. After that, it was easy. Se-han just finished it off because this game is all about strategy. After finishing the monster, she asked if this dungeon didn't have a secret room like the other one. Maybe this one doesn't. The only thing they gain here are the items from this guy, since there are no monsters other than the boss in this type of dungeon. And with that, the rewards for defeating the boss are quite OP. The dark jacket and the dark gloves. Although these don't have the best stats, it's impossible to ignore their special abilities. So he took both items for himself and told her to keep the rest. After finishing that, he wondered if he had prepared enough. His stats were good, and with that ridiculous number of skills, he shouldn't have any problems with the main quest. But his goal was always to complete the full cleanup. He was very lucky with that DLC package, because using it would allow him to kill that Dan Raven in the 3rd stage. Now they were going to start advancing in the main mission. Meanwhile, Jisoo reached her destination, but there was no one there. She opened the door, calling for her mom and dad, but inside the place was full of pumpkin heads. So she started whipping everyone in that style. One of the monsters bit her from behind, but with the strength of her hand, she exploded its head and healed herself with that skill. After killing all the creatures, she realized her dad was lying there on the ground. Then the phone started ringing, and she answered with a sinister look on her face. Then with Sihan, they walked ahead where a woman was welcoming them to roam a world. She asked if there was really an open park in the middle of an apocalypse like this. The girl tried to strike up a conversation with the woman, but she just followed the script, saying that today the entrance was free and invited them both to go into the park. Right away, the girl realized there was something off and asked if they were really going in. Since it was part of the mission, they decided to go. This Roma world was a well-kept place where the people present were neither players nor monsters. That's why everything was connected to that bastard who was controlling the region. Then he explained that these people were regular civilians being forced to live like this in the park, but at that moment, the quest finally appeared. Seeing that, he immediately thought something was wrong, because the 3rd mission was to save the people in the amusement park. Since the people working there were being hunted by monsters, he had to find a way to escape this place and save the people. Right ahead, they saw something suspicious. One of the civilians was desperate because their collar was glowing. The girl went to ask what was wrong, but at that moment, his head exploded. Seeing that, it seemed like there was a time limit for how long people could survive until they completed the quest, and this crazy mission was way worse than he imagined. The girl was shocked, wondered what had happened, but it wasn't her fault, it was just the crazy game. And anyway, the person he was looking for should show up soon, so it was better to collect all the stamps. He went to the guy asking him to guide them. The little guy tried to stop them, saying nothing good came from there, but if they didn't complete the quest, they would all die. Since he wanted it so badly, he started introducing them to the haunted house. The way to win this one was simple, just make it to the end. So they went in and the girl was all close to him, because it was terrifying. But her excuse for staying close was that they couldn't get lost that way. Then up ahead, he ducked his head because a demolition ball with spikes came flying, so she was supposed to crawl while several balls passed over their heads. A monster came to attack the girl, and he threw the lance in its mouth. He then asked if she was crying on the ground, and since it was hard with her like that, he picked her up and said, "Let's go, let's finish this," since monsters are popping up one after another. Stan started destroying everything in front of him, and she was there, scared out of her mind. He finished off 2 more, thinking that the attack pattern was the same as other haunted houses. Traps appear, and then monsters attack. The only difference was that these monsters were really trying to box you in. After that, the guy at the door was surprised because Sihan was the first person to get out in less than 15 minutes. Sihan casually said it was fun, while their dead weight was lying on the ground saying it was fun. It didn't even seem like she had just pissed herself and was crying. Sihan was asking the guy about the thing around his neck and where he could get one. Then the guy grabbed one and began doing some tests in the plaza, coating it with orichalcum. He threw it ahead to test something. Immediately, the necklace went crazy, jumping around, because basically, the explosion couldn't break the coating. That's why the heat inside shattered. He was observing this to try to help the people on the mission. Then he remembered something from the past, where someone had said that it's easy to ignore someone who has already ignored you and move on with your life. But this time, the situation would be different. Now they were heading to another area since it was dangerous to stay around here. At this point in the game, it's safe to move according to the system. So they went to the next ride, the roller coaster. The girl was excited, wanting to go, but after going down the mountain and going through all that, she didn't want to see another park ever again. Sagan was there saying she'd be dead 4 times over if it weren't for him, because not only did the roller coaster not have a safety bar, but there were also flying pumpkins. And to make it worse, at the end of the mountain, there was a huge beast with its mouth wide open. Lastly, the thing didn't have brakes, and they fell straight to the ground. Now that there was just one more left, the girl wanted to go. The problem was, it wouldn't be possible since the park had closed. The lights turned on and music began playing, probably for some night event. She asked if it was a parade, but outside there was a monster flying around in costumes everywhere. He even covered her face so she wouldn't see it, as they were blatantly killing people. She was curious and wanted to look, and he told her that those were the zombies from earlier. At that point, she turned around wanting to leave, but sit your butt down, because outside, there was a parade of monsters hunting people, so they had to follow him inside quietly. San remembered that the survivors from this quest mentioned a large safari here, and from what that guy said, the people there were captured from the first mission and sent directly to the third main mission. Although this is usually impossible, the Raven guy made it happen. He was definitely interested in the game of the gods. Although the stars have deities, no matter how high they are, they can't play unless they are gods. So Seihan wasn't sure whether the Raven made a contract with the GM or found a flaw in the system to make it happen. Ahead, just as he said, there were a lot of people. The girl arrived first, asking if they could enter. The guys, just by seeing they had 4 stamps, were scared and told them to come in. He introduced himself as Siuk, and said they were incredible for having 4 stamps, because even the commander only had 3, she commenting that this was really good even though she cried the whole way. The guy led them to the center and said they were going to visit the commander. Meanwhile, Stahan was observing, thinking that based on what he knew, there should be around 200 people here, which meant the person he had to make friends with should be here. Then he finally spotted them, the person he needed to meet. It was the only avatar of one of the 12 high-ranking gods, Hephaestus. This guy was Song Sai-woo. He was one of the most famous players in his past life. The weapons made by him were sold for outrageous prices, and all the top players had at least one of his items. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that many people only survived because of him, even though in the end, no one escaped death. But this guy here was nothing like the Song Sai-woo Sahan knew. He was someone full of confidence, unlike this one, who seemed to have given up on life. And the guy beside him must be his brother. From what Sahan had heard, this guy died at the end of the 3rd quest. Sahan approached, asking if it was okay to sit next to him, and the guy agreed, saying no one would sit near them since everyone in the safari avoided them. The talkative kid started saying it was good for their left egg, because these people would avoid them too. Well, the group arrived and introduced themselves. A slightly blind guy was Song Chan, and the little brother was Song Sai. He shook Sanan's hand, saying they should get along to complete the 3rd quest, and despite looking like a normal player on the outside, there was something bothering Stahan about him. Then he asked if this was really a sword. Even though he used it more like a cane because his eyes were hurt, he could still fight a lot with it. Just hearing this, Song told him to stop talking about that story, sending him off and going to sleep. Kind of like those rebellious teenagers. After that, he started talking about how not long ago they had escaped from that guy, and the guy they had escaped from was the Sentinel, who commanded this place, Iron Rule. Just hearing that information, Sahan was shocked because the only Sentinel who controls this area in Seoul should be Orga, the dragon he killed. But here, not too far away, there was another Sentinel, so it must have been because of him. That's why the quest changed and why Song Sai was in this state. Since this world is a game where the admins manage the server, but that doesn't mean they are the kings of the game. Above them is the law, which controls all the games of the universe, the system. And it could have been the system that caused all this, since the Sentinel is a hidden monster placed by the system. With these thoughts, he went to sleep, imagining that he should be careful from now on. The girl was there snoring beside him when something strange happened. Song was leaving the walls. The guards explained they wouldn't accompany him because it was already late at night. He said it was fine and that he knew the area, and so the guards let him go. Since an observer was following him, this seemed odd to Sahan. He then entered the gods community and spoke to their wild card. She said he seemed more active in the chat. Then the sneaky guy asked to look through her observer for a bit. She agreed but asked why first. Actually, he was interested in a player, but the guy wasn't accepting it at all. The wild card started connecting the screen, talking about the player who was walking with his avatar. And lately, many gods had tried to speak with him, but this guy rejected them all. Since his avatar was sleeping, she lent it without issue. But if he had any other good information, he was supposed to tell her first. Actually, he wanted to know about another player who had left, and that's how he found the guy using the observer. From what he thought, this wasn't a bathroom break. This guy was reporting something. The guy asked if there had been a special incident today. He said nothing unusual, just that 2 players had shown up today. The little raven told him to keep an eye out and report immediately. They tried anything. Then the creature flew away while he knelt down. Even the Joker was impressed by the gem they had found. While Sahan was deep in thought, he remembered what Song Sai had said. In his past life, his brother was virtuous and had sacrificed himself to save him. The next day, Sahan went around asking everyone in the safari, thinking that gathering information wasn't as easy as it seemed, since everything seemed similar to his past life, except for one thing, a damn creature called Iron Rule. A monster with solid, very rigid skin, and because of its ability to increase its defense and attack stats as it consumes metal. Even with his current skills, Sahan wouldn't be able to inflict damage on it, and that's why this Sentinel was making things complicated. The girl came over and asked if he was thinking of eliminating that Sentinel, but that was still way beyond his limits. And since he was saying this, he was probably planning to go after it later. Either way, if everything went well, it would work out. As for Song Sai, he wouldn't get better even if they tried something. So he decided to leave him there and let time heal the wounds. Now he decided to step out because there was someone he needed to find. Meanwhile, the girl would keep an eye on those 2 until he returned. As he was about to leave, let's head to Kara's castle, which was completely knocked out on the ground. Until Iron Rule showed up. Kara said he had really enjoyed the guy who got 3 stamps, since many people tremble in fear just trying to get 2. Iron Rule said that was true until yesterday. A new record of 4 stamps had been set, and not just 1 but 2 players had done it. He wondered if this was even possible without the help of a god. But the 3 of them passed easily, and if this continued, they'd get the 5 stamps and complete the mission today. And if a star like him gets involved so soon, it will be problematic. In the end, he told them to let the guy go, as it would be better for at least 2 players to complete the mission. The number of players attempting to complete it was decreasing. If at least 2 completed it, the others would be encouraged to do the same and leave the park. So Iron Rule went out to patrol. Karas himself thought Iron Rule was an idiot when he first saw him. That's why it was so funny seeing him beg for his life. And despite this, the reason he was added is a mystery. Even the GM of Korea doesn't know. Then he told Iron Rule to have fun with the insects, and Sehan, of course, was on the same route that he was patrolling, until up ahead, he finally arrived. A huge elephant spoke, saying that killing an ordinary idiot wasn't fun. He raised his hand and slammed it on the ground. Sehan dodged and went for the feet, but there was no way to inflict damage even with a sword wrapped in orichalcum, since this creature was too tough. It came at him again. While the creature said that even though it hadn't unleashed its full power, it never imagined a player like him existed. Sehan kept cutting, and the creature complained because he wasn't saying anything, completely clueless. Sehan, excited, asked if sentinels were always so talkative and told it to come at him. Iron Rule came at him angry with a punch, but Sehan dodged, hitting its arm in return. Since this monster was full of openings due to its massive size, it attacked, but even with hits landing, the creature took no damage. And since the sword didn't lose durability, its body must not be harder than orichalcum, which meant he just needed more strength. He went for the legs, thinking the creature might have a weakness, but no luck. It came at him even angrier. Sehan could only fight this guy because his stats were maximized. Otherwise, there would be no way. And because of that, he couldn't kill Iron Rule right now. If it was this strong, Kara's stats must be even higher. Since he was planning to kill Kara's, there was no other way except to buy the DLC in the first round. The creature screamed, asking where he was. It called Iron Rule a slug, who came at him angrily, smashing everything. But meanwhile, Sehan was already far away, as there was no way to kill this creature the way things were now. He needed a fatal strike. In the end, there was only one path forward. Then, let's go to the girl in the safari. The blind guy was asking if she was Sehan's sister, and of course they weren't, since their last names were different. She even asked if the two of them were really brothers, since most siblings fight and only God knows why. He asked that because he saw that Sehan was incredible for getting 4 stamps. The other girl bragged that she also had 4. Then the tough guy showed up from behind, startling her because he appeared out of nowhere. The blind guy said he was talking about him just now. He wanted to know how they had met. Then he said bluntly, "We caught each other robbing a bank," and called the blind guy to talk to him privately. Sehan went with him to the middle of the forest and asked if he was the one sending information to Iron Rule. Immediately, the guy pointed his sword, asking how he knew that. And of course we dodge, right? But the point is, he wanted to ask something. This meant he had to come at Sehan with everything, so he could analyze what he was capable of. The blind guy came at him with the sword in all directions, and even though he was blind, he was really good. Sehan, stopping, said he was all arrogant, but was just dodging. And if there was nothing to say, the only response would be to kill him. Then the blind guy put away his sword and started pulling out something else. But Sehan grabbed it with just his fingertips, saying that his fencing was already at this level. The blind guy was there, not believing that this crazy guy stopped his sword with just 2 fingers. Just seeing these moves, Sehan realized that the blind guy had really high stats for someone who wasn't an avatar. It gave him again, and Sehan kept dodging everything until he got tired and asked, "What the hell is this?" And actually, it was the gloves that were really good. Sehan asked why he was spying even though he was strong like that, and asked if it was because of his little brother. Iron Rule must have promised to spare his life if the blind guy helped. And that was it. When he met the creature, he fought. But that couldn't even be called a fight. It was a toy in that bastard's hands. So he had no choice but to accept the offer to save his brother. According to Sehan, he had plans to do something right now. And with him on their side, they could have an advantage in figuring out what that bastard was going to do. Then the guy went crazy, asking if Sehan was really going to face Iron Rule because it was impossible. Stan knew that since he just bumped into the elephant. But that only meant they couldn't kill it now. Not that would never happen. Either way, he told the guy to continue doing what he was doing and pass the information to Sehan as well. And of course, he would have to tell his brother everything because he was the most important person. Then they told the kid, who got agitated, asking how he could hide something like that. Meanwhile, the girl asked if that was why he had asked for that earlier and asked what he was going to do. And of course, now the plan was to kill Iron Rule. She asked him to go complete the quests, but now wasn't a good idea. Then later, the kid asked if they were really going to face Rule. And according to what the blind guy said, they had only 1 week. And that's why he needed the boy's help. He asked if he wanted to create a weapon that could kill Iron Rule. And the kid, all excited, said he was definitely in. Then he brought over the basic equipment production package and made up an excuse that he had received it from a quest earlier, asking if he could forge anything with it. So he decided to make something to test it out. Meanwhile, the girl was going to try and make a shield to block other players. She, all excited, asked, "How do you know about this?" And the truth is, it's because the girl's skill is to distract people. She then used spatial distortion, making herself disappear along with the whole place. While Sehan remembered that this was the reason no one could ever find her once she disappeared in his past life, Sehan handed over some things for the blind guy to melt and make something. He then asked, sword, spear, or maybe a knife. But in fact, it wasn't any of those. He handed him a blueprint, and the guy was shocked because it was the first time he had seen something like that. And this, of course, was a weapon capable of killing the Iron Rule. The big guy was there destroying things, thinking that Sehan Sehan would be out looking for the last stamp, but to avoid any warning, he must still be there in the safari. A stuffed panda came running, calling for Iron Rule because Karas was looking for him, and with that, it seemed like it was time for some fun. The bear tried to say that the monsters still needed to prepare, but that didn't matter because only he was enough. Until at the top of a peak, Kagai was asking if they were really coming since everyone was evacuating to the mountains. The girl transformed into a bird to get a look. Eventually, she saw Iron Rule ahead, wondering how they were going to kill something like that. Then she arrived, saying they were very close, so they needed to move even faster. She wondered if she should leave everyone behind and run away. But then she remembered all the friendship and everything she had gone through with Sehan, until the blind guy appeared, saying he could buy them some time. He then ran thinking of everyone, and how he needed to take responsibility for leaving his companions. He arrived at Iron Rule, saying he had been waiting for him. He said the others were fleeing, and that he would show him a shortcut to get there faster. But without hesitation, he said no, as there was no reason to listen to someone trying to buy time. He wasn't the type to come here just to help, and so there was no choice. He pulled out his sword to buy time fighting against him. He disappeared and started slashing. Rule said that he should use a better sword. Then he came at him with a punch. Luckily, he was stopped, or else it would have been the end for the blind guy. Sehan arrived, asking what the point of being strong was if he hadn't eaten any quality metals. Then he asked what that was on Sehan's arm, who said he brought a friend this time, and here to say hello. He called it Tunnler. Finally, the girl found a four-eyed guy. He called her to hide with him since Sehan said this was the safest spot. And although that was true, she still had no idea how he was going to kill that monster. Then in the fight, Rule came raging, punching everywhere, thinking that if he landed even one punch, it would be a hit kill. But Sehan dodged everything and was already on top, saying that he had gotten slower since the last time they met. Then Rule came even angrier with that punch, and in fact, it was probably because Sehan had cracked his arm. When he arrived, he was fighting like a dizzy cockroach. Sehan jumped back, saying that it was good, but he needed to wait a little to recharge after one use. The good news was that it was almost over, meaning Iron Rule had less than a minute left to live. He, furious, said he was a sentry and couldn't die. But now he could stop punching like a madman because it was over Pretty Boy. He tried to complain but was hit with a punch to the face. Sehan had already earned the title of the Sentinel Hunter and received the reward of dealing 30% more damage to sentries, while thinking that he should get even stronger. Then the blind guy arrived, asking if he had really died. And yes, the monster was wiped out. And the detail, he said he would tell them later because there were too many eyes in the area. The blind guy thanked him from the bottom of his heart. But at that moment, the idiot was thinking out loud that there was one more. Sehan arrived, covering her mouth, saying he would give the details later, because finally Kara's time had come. Then over at the gods community, the guys were freaking out because a regular player had killed a sentry. They were asking about the information, but no one knew. And the sweet-ass Koryanga went to tell them something since her avatar was always around. She was just thinking that this was an interesting kid and wondering what he would do with the crow. That Sehan, the girl asked if there was no drop. The only drop was a stone called Grimorio, which was an A-rank skill. That is, if you eat metal and use the skill, it turns parts of your body into metal. She was even excited because it was super OP, but Sehan hit her on the head, saying that this skill would be more useful for her than for him, because it would be great if she turned her hand into metal to fight. Then she still asked if everything was fine. Sehan just said it was a reward for helping out all this time. Then she used the skill Starfish from the stone. After that, everyone ran through the park, fighting smaller monsters and saving civilians using the strategy Sand developed. The girl arrived, saying that they had forgotten one thing. They hadn't finished getting all the stamps since there was that quest they were doing. Then they called the guy, asking if he had a stamp. Using one of the stamps from the park, they completed the quest. While she was incredulous, thinking it was that easy, Sehan said there was no reward. And in this way, they could complete everyone's quest on the way, except for his. Then at the crows, he was really pissed off because Iron Rule still hadn't shown up, until a rat came in saying that he had just found out that an unexpected event had happened. He thought it was because the monster was killing everyone, but it wasn't that. The Iron Rule was dead. Then he got serious, asking what nonsense that was. The monsters, in fact, hadn't noticed before because they were fighting against the players who were attacking them. The crow, pissed off, ordered him to gather all the monsters and attack the safari. However, there's another problem. The monsters had already gathered around the safari, but the place was completely empty. So he was pissed off, asking who the hell did this. While Sehan thought that the bastard would finally show up, everyone was fleeing as fast as possible. Then Sehan met up with the blind guy who couldn't believe they were all leaving. In reality, this would only happen if everyone made it out safely. He asked if it was because of the crow, and yes, that bastard would appear. Stan felt a sense of danger and realized that the creature was coming. And then the crow appeared, flying angrily. With such a presence, he surely was a star. He landed and said that he didn't expect to have to leave his throne. Just by seeing that creature, it was clear this wasn't going to be an easy fight. Even Sehan was a bit nervous, just like that day when he faced the dragon. But this time, it wasn't fear, he was just anxious for the battle, since people depended on him to escape. He told everyone that he would hold off the crow and that they should all run and escape the park. The crow, furious, replied, "Brother, do you think I'm just going to stand here while these sycophants are running away?" He started using his feathers. Sehan started cutting through them, asking if he was going to bring everything from the start. The crow, impressed, realized a human was talking to him like this and took the chance to taunt him. While the crow was getting angrier, Sehan's plan was to buy at least 30 minutes, since all of his preparations had been for this moment. The crow charged at him using the shadow rush, but with the dark jacket, Sehan could move instantly through the shadows. The crow flew right past him. Sehan appeared from behind and threw his spear, but it didn't work as the crow caught it and enraged flew toward him, breaking rocks and sending his claws. Sehan dodged and retreated, saying, "Good luck dodging the next one." Then a storm of feathers came at him. Sehan couldn't dodge them all, of course. By the next wave of feathers, he accelerated his speed, using the celestial assassin's physical attributes along with healing. Since everyone was almost at the exit, he just needed to hold on for a little longer. Meanwhile, the crow said that he would let Sehan experience the rare torment of never being able to see again. And seeing this, Sehan knew he would use that ability. After all, that was the strength of a star. In that form, the crow said he wouldn't let anyone leave that place because he wasn't affected by the mission's limitations. Sehan was stunned, thinking about how he could use the victory sweep ability. The crow moved so fast that Sehan barely had time to dodge, even with the jacket. The crow charged at him, saying that it was impressive that Sehan had managed to be annoying from start to finish. Sehan, down below, cheekily replied that the crow thought he was the king of everything. But the crow quickly reached his neck, saying that all he had to do was kill him and the bastards who ran away. So he ordered, "Die quietly." But wait, this was all part of the plan. Sehan told him not to be so careless next time, and since the third main mission was completed, the rewards would be delivered and he could buy the DLC package for life. So Sehan bought the package that allowed him to use a higher ranking ability or item. That's when he used the transfer certificate, piercing the crow's stomach. This ability was from the growth category, and when fighting against a star, all attributes would be increased by 100% for 30 minutes in addition to causing critical damage. Frightened, the crow flew off, asking who Sehan was. Then Sehan sent the feathers above him. The crow threw another one of those spears, but this time he stopped, complaining that it wouldn't work. Out of nowhere, the spear pierced the crow's wings and he fell like a shot to the ground. The creature, enraged, launched a powerful attack, which Sehan had to block using a shield. And since there was time, Sehan sent another one to the crow's legs, mockingly asking if, now, the survival instinct kicked in. The crow attacked desperately, thinking this must be a bug. But Sehan effortlessly defended everything. He tried again, but this time he pulled out her friend, the same one who took down the Iron Rule. Then he jumped up and the crow used a barrier, causing a kaboom that destroyed everything. Sehan charged at the crow, who said he wouldn't lose in a fistfight. The crow knocked Sehan to the ground, but as Sehan had said, don't be careless. In that moment, a spear pierced the crow's heart. Meanwhile, in the higher dimension, the crow had sent the bug report to the GM. He was cursing the bastard who died to a player so easily. He thought he shouldn't have been so kind to him, as it had been fun. Besides, the player balancing was also a problem. How had a player gotten the victory sweep ability so early on? Because of this, he decided to be more cautious when observing him. Then the system showed an announcement about a major update. From now on, the main missions would be in an open world format, alongside side missions and guild creation. And the fourth main mission, a large-scale raid. A raid boss would appear in each region. You could receive special items or materials once the boss was killed. And finally, we were in an open world. The raid on the boss would start in 15 days. Mine Ali was clearly confused since I didn't really know what a boss raid was, nor what a guild was, and especially why it would take so long. But logically, our dear Sehan explains that it's because many people haven't completed the third mission yet, so this was more or less to keep everything fair, at least that's what he thinks. After a little while, Sai Wu and Chang Wu entered the room, asking if our process was already feeling better. Sai Wu had just finished preparing the items, and logically, Song was worried and asked once again if he could really stand up, considering he was still quite worn out and had been unable to even get up earlier that day. Clearly, the guy was feeling much better than before, as he could now use his rank E healing ability, and even his serious wounds had healed since his skill level had increased. He tells Maina that now that he's better, he will head directly to Dajan and asks what she plans to do. However, she questions why he would go there since there were 4 boss raids in Seoul. He simply replies that he wants to go to Seong Shimri because he has something to do there. But this time, she decides not to press further, even though she's curious. While they were talking, the protagonist suddenly looked up and noticed Jester's little eye watching them. He could only think about how she had become such a blatant spectator, and Mina found it extremely regrettable. Remembering the past, the protagonist thinks about how lucky it was that Karis had used an ability that blocked vision, specifically the Curtain of Dust, which used darkness to obstruct the view. Thanks to that, the observers only managed to see the end of the fight when the spear had already pierced his chest. Seizing the moment, the protagonist tells Mina that her god wanted her to accompany him. Yet she still refuses, as she has no reason to go that far. But Sehan, being clever, quickly states that he wants to make a proposal, not only to her, but also to the other two, Saiwoo and Changwoo. Later, with the whole group gathered, he asks what they think about joining his guild once he officially creates one. Basically, the guy is recruiting and laying the foundation for forming a group. This guy is awesome. Our dear Mina wasn't too fond of the idea, and Chang said he didn't think he would be much help to our protagonist, unlike Saiwoo, who is very eager to join his guild. But Sehan interrupts and says that not only should they take their time to think it over, but Sai shouldn't feel the need to speak so respectfully. He can talk to him casually, just like he does with his brother. After all, Sehan thinks about how in the future, Saiwoo will become the best craftsman among the players, and Chan will grow so strong that he could be compared to an avatar, in addition to possessing a rare skill that grants him immense potential. The little brat, along with the two potentials, interrupts Sehan's thoughts and declares their desire to join him, emphasizing that they won't be able to back out once they agree. Taking advantage of the moment, Mina asks the protagonist when he plans to leave for Daejeon. He has no time to waste, so he decides to leave immediately. With that, we get an epic transition to a crowded train line, with one of the conductors announcing that they are heading directly to Daejeon Station. However, the announcement is abruptly interrupted by a small group shouting that the Crescent Moon Guild is taking control of the train. But they couldn't have imagined that she, the guild herself, Jisoo, was present in that very place. In this same train, there was only one front car. Our protagonist was sitting, relaxing, but he started to hear all the noise coming from the back and even began to wonder if it could be a monster. However, since most of the passengers are players, it shouldn't have trouble dealing with it. He's more concerned about the reward for his mission because, unlike all the others that were platinum, this one is completely ordinary. See, when you keep receiving only good stuff, you forget to appreciate the normal rewards. The reward is the E-rank skill hunter's intuition, which allows him to roughly sense the location of a nearby monster through its tracks. But that's too vague for our protagonist, though there's nothing he can do about it. Either way, the reward for killing the crow was more than enough compared to the mission reward. Thinking about this, he decides to check what he received, and in total, there were 4 things, with 2 of them not being revealed. For becoming the new star of the body, he receives the skills Dust Curtain and Crow's Eyes. The other 2 remain hidden precisely because he doesn't have enough divinity, and when he develops greater divinity, he'll gain access to those skills. Looking more closely at the Crow's Eyes skill, it basically allows him to create an energy crow that he can use for surveillance. There are no limits to how many crows he can create and spread around, but the more he creates, the harder it becomes to control them. A personal version of the Observer, essentially. The second skill, Dust Curtain, is simply the ability Kara's used, and it merely hides him in darkness. It's simple but useful, and it seems to change depending on the user. With Kara's, the skill created the huge smoke curtain, but according to the description, it only hides our protagonist in darkness. But he's more impressed by the fact that he received divinity just for defeating a mere star, as even in terms of divinity, it was the weakest one. In any case, it was just a bonus, and if he continues performing this well, he might be able to face the Witch's Observer in Daejeon. The Witch he's referring to basically loved humanity and wanted everyone to die for Sihan, but at the same time, she wanted them to live. What a crazy mess. The protagonist thinks of her as a damned witch, and it's even funny for him to think that she was one of those who had a positive vision of humanity within that little group. But that doesn't matter now. He just wants to know if he'll arrive in Daejeon quickly if he takes a nap. But let's not forget that while the protagonist is here relaxing calmly, in the back, a wild brawl is unfolding. The man who previously announced the takeover is now fleeing desperately, thinking that she is the girl from the rumors. Black clothes, black hair, and no one could have imagined that they would die because of this rumor. And my friends, Jisoo already took one guy out with just one arm and didn't make it easy for the one who was fleeing. She simply delivered a Robin Hood slap to the back of his neck, causing him to collapse entirely against the door. When he dared to beg her not to do anything, promising he would never try to hijack a train again, she even asked if he really thought she would believe that. Of course, he tried to defend himself, saying he was telling the truth and would live as a good person. However, she only found it amusing and raised her hand toward him, her eyes glowing red. Jumping ahead to the Daejeon station, Sehan was stepping off the train, watching everyone fleeing desperately. As he wondered if something had happened on the train, the goddess Jisoo appeared, causing our protagonist to ask when she had arrived there. But she merely complained that he hadn't even noticed they were on the same train. When he asked if she had finished what she came to do there, she confirmed but wasn't entirely sure. Mainly, she wanted to know why he had gone there and admitted that she had been following him since he boarded the train. He just confirmed that he had something to do in that place, but he was confused, knowing she was using his location through the group to follow him. She confirmed it, saying they had never decided when and where they would meet, so she took it upon herself to go after him. Still, following someone all the time is bizarre. He even asked if she knew he was in Roma World, and she confirmed it, prompting him to ask why she hadn't come to him earlier. Thinking about it, if she had helped him fight the crow, it would have been so much easier. And he's not lying, she's ridiculously strong. Unfortunately, she wanted to go there directly, but her third mission came up precisely on her way there. Even though it wasn't difficult, it was a bit problematic, and she arrived late because she was dealing with it. And my friends, her memory is of a one-sided MASACRE she carried out against many people with just her mace. He said it was fine, and that he had come to Daejeon to kill the raid boss. She had been expecting that response, leaving Sehan confused as to why she didn't ask why he had gone there when there were only 2 bosses there in 4 in Seoul. But unlike Mina, she had already gotten used to him doing completely suspicious things, and she wouldn't have said anything even if he claimed he went there to have sex. He genuinely doesn't know if she has a good or bad impression of him after that. When she asked where they were headed, Sehen confirmed they were going to Dunson, and he would explain the details to her on the way. Back in Shinram Seoul, Mina was wandering around looking for the boss, calling Sehen a bastard for not giving her the exact location. Basically, the protagonist handed her a piece of paper saying she should find a foreign place and his daughter somewhere in all of Shinram. What a prankster. Worse still, he drew it. It wasn't even a photo. While walking through the area, she noticed a place where things seemed a bit destroyed, as if a monster had wrecked everything. Instinctively, she dodged a werewolf that appeared out of nowhere. She knew that if she didn't land a fatal blow in one hit, she'd be screwed since they regenerate very quickly. Before she could strike, a piece of concrete was thrown at the werewolf, knocking it away. The thrower was none other than a blonde man accompanied by a small child wearing a hoodie. He called Mina over, saying it was dangerous to stay there. Naturally, she realized they were the ones she was looking for and approached, thanking them. The blonde man just said they needed to help and that she could call him Stone Thrower. The little girl beside him started scolding her father, saying he was embarrassing her. Furthermore, she pointed out that our mystic from Paraguay didn't even need help. But Stone Thrower said she shouldn't treat others that way, and even if Mina didn't need help, they couldn't let a mere student dirty her hands. Again, the girl insisted that since many observers were watching Mina, she must be really strong. In Mina's mind, she kept thinking they were exactly as the protagonist had described. Making excuses about destiny, she asked for their names, and they introduced themselves as Luke Taylor and the little girl Lynn. Mina asked if it was okay for her to follow them for a while. After observing, she concluded that Luke must be a player, considering he threw a concrete slab like it was a paper airplane. But Lynn was definitely strange. Luke agreed they could go together, but his daughter kept questioning whether it made sense to help someone who was clearly stronger than them. While they argued, Mina took the opportunity to send a message to Sehen, saying she had found the people he was looking for. In the place where Sehen is, several soldiers were walking around searching for some creature or something abnormal. Jisoo mentions that she even heard society would recover over time, and she somewhat believes this might be true, seeing the cooperation of the soldiers. However, our protagonist doesn't believe they can keep going relying solely on missions since they're in an open world. A soldier approaches them, asking if they're players. As soon as they confirm, he asks for their names and identification numbers, explaining that he had received orders to record information from all players present. To Sehen, this is pure nonsense. Since he considers it ridiculous, he asks Jisoo if she could run to a building. Once she confirms, she begins preparing to run. The poor soldier tries to ask again, as it's his job, but the two start running, escaping his sight. At the top of the building, the goddess questions why they climbed up there, if perhaps he wanted to see the boss's position or what it looked like. That was basically it, but he also wanted to know who its little friends were. He summons the eyes of the raven, and from his shadow, a flock of ravens emerges. These ravens start circling above them, and Jisoo is impressed by this scene, not expecting him to have such an ability. He truly is a box of surprises. He asks if he could take a look at her status while the ravens search the area. When she agrees, the protagonist wonders if she even knows how to refuse anything. Looking at her attributes, he's shocked, questioning what she was doing to raise her stats so much in addition to acquiring knowledge of the body and vital damage. Somehow, she already has the healing ability at rank C and celestial assassin physique at level 3. This leaves him very confused because if she already has her physique at this level, she should at least appear evil or something like that. Before he can question her, he feels a warning from one of the ravens and receives a signal. In a completely devastated area, they discuss how the monster responsible for this must not have been normal. The traces were likely left by the boss. As they converse, a timer appears showing 333 hours remaining. Jisoo is confused because there was so much time left, yet the boss was already there. This leads the protagonist to state that they can't trust the clocks. They don't even know if they're accurate. Most of the time, they're just misleading. Jisoo understands and notices claw marks and large wing feathers. When he confirms that they belong to a single monster, she denies it, saying it's impossible these marks came from a bird. And why on earth did she have to open her mouth? As soon as she speaks, a huge being descends from the sky, a black tiger with white wings. It's one of the monsters from Chinese legends, one of the four perils, Qianqi. Of course, Sehen didn't expect it to show up right away. He thought he'd have trouble finding it, but the beast came directly to them. The dungeon must be right where it was protecting, as it's the only place big enough for such a tiger to hide. Along with this, a system message appears, announcing main mission number 4, Vanguard of Destruction. They must defeat a creature they would never dream of facing and stop it before the entire city is destroyed. It's a rank C difficulty. Jisoo asks if it would really be just the two of them against this juiced up tiger, and our protagonist responds with a resounding hell no. He explains that it only appeared because they found the location before everyone else and its mere appearance triggered the mission. However, while they're thinking and the goddess senses the smell of blood somewhere, the enormous tiger simply roars and charges at them. In the middle of the attack, Sehen notices horn marks on its body, making him question if it had dealt with that thing. What thing? Probably the like you still haven't left on the video. Don't think I'm not watching you. Stay sharp. Out of nowhere, after dodging the attack from this overly muscular Frosted Flakes tiger, the beast suddenly starts to flee. It just chickened out. Jisoo is as confused as we are, and our protagonist begins to reflect. From what he remembers in his past life, those scars should have appeared later, but there's no no guarantee he remembers everything correctly. So he starts running into the dungeon. It doesn't seem to be the dungeon of that big tiger though. Inside, they find the source of the blood and the true owner of this dungeon, a fallen unicorn dead on the ground, Phylon, the sacred horned beast. Jisoo comments that this creature looks a lot like something she had heard of in a Chinese legend and asks if it really is the Phylon. The protagonist agrees if this is indeed the real one, but it doesn't even have horns, so it's kind of strange. Stan remembers the horn stuck on the tiger which probably belonged to this creature. The horn stores immense power, and that's where the Phylon's strength comes from, regardless of whether it's old or corrupted. The protagonist specifically wants its horn after tracking Kyanki. In the end, their screw, well, this is mainly because the protagonist can't leave this place without the horn. It wouldn't be good if the big tiger absorbed its power. While he's lost in thought, Jisoo asks if they shouldn't start walking around since they don't know what they might find or where there could be a reward in the dungeon. However, since it's not a high-ranked dungeon, there probably wouldn't be anything valuable enough to replace the Phylon's horn. Just to contradict him, Jisoo announces that she found something. She stands up, holding a massive, shiny egg in her hand. Of course, he's startled, asking where she found it. She explains that she heard faint heartbeats coming from under the dead unicorn. He thanks her deeply and explains that this is essentially a monster egg. A Krillin egg is like a fruit. If incubated long enough, a new Phylon will hatch. Kai if male and Lin if female. Put them together, and you get Phylon. Jisoo starts receiving several items: a high-level baby bottle, nutritious pet drinks, high-level diapers, and basically, they now have a mini mission to make this monster hatch. They also need to insert a hunter's blood as a catalyst for the pet, which will influence its stats and abilities when born. The protagonist starts thinking like L, realizing his blood isn't worth using, and Jisoo's would likely make the creature violent. Since they have 2 days to decide, the best option would be Mina's blood. Finding a decent hunter in 2 days would be a pain. At that exact moment, he receives a message from Mina saying she had found the people our protagonist had told her about. Bingo, that happened right on time. And over there on the other side of the country, with Mina, who had already reported finding them just a minute ago, the cuckold who asked her to inform him isn't even responding. Can you believe it? But while she's complaining, he finally replies, only asking where she is, and of course, she finds this annoying since she didn't even get a thank you for doing something he asked for. If he doesn't respond to her properly this time, she's just going to slap him. But the moment she starts speaking out loud, calling him a son of a bitch, Sehen appears behind her, asking what she was about to call him, startling the poor girl. She asked if he wasn't supposed to be in Daejeon, and he was, but he came back quickly. Noticing Jisoo came along, she starts questioning why they dress alike and only wear black. Luke begins asking if they were friends of Mina, stepping slightly in front to protect his daughter. But guys, let's highlight that this guy's arm desperately needs a chiropractor. It's entirely disproportionate. Lol. The protagonist introduces himself as Mina's partner and introduces Jisoo. The moment Luke shakes his hand, the fairground mystic starts complaining mentally because partner is a damn lie. He just uses her. And she hadn't even mentioned anything about the stone launcher, and he already knew its name. In the middle of her complaints, Sen calls her name. She thinks he's about to ask her to do something else, but he simply shows her a piece of mithril. He had planned to give it to her as a thank you gift, but it seems she doesn't want it. She starts jumping, saying she definitely wants it, and asks what it is. This mithril would help if she ate it. After she takes it and gets all shy in her corner, Jisoo asks if they shouldn't hatch the egg before anything else. Since that really is the priority, Singen calls for Lin, showing her the egg, a beast egg no less. He explains that it's a sacred beast egg, and to hatch it, they would need her help. It wasn't a big deal. She just needed to place her hand on the egg. Stan shows her what she needs to do, and there's nothing strange about it. Since Luke tells her to go ahead because the protagonist doesn't seem like a bad person, she places her hand on the egg, but the egg cuts her finger. As she complains to her father about getting hurt, the protagonist apologizes, explaining that she got cut by the egg's shell. Several messages start appearing saying that the catalyst was successfully applied to the killing egg. At this point, it was necessary to provide the required nutrients for the beast, and after giving what it needs, all they had to do was wait. Mina asks if all he needed was for her to find them for this, but it's not quite that simple. Sehen has future plans that are too complicated to explain at the moment, and it's making her very curious. However, he simply says she'll find out later. Until that moment arrives, he asks her to keep walking with him. She agrees but warns that she'll need a reward. Sehen accepts, thinking she's very easy to deal with. It's enough to give her a few gifts, and she's already happy. Even though he thought he alone would be enough since he already knew everything from the first attempt, it turned out that wasn't quite the case. He finally realized this after the fights against the Minotaur and Karis. Worse still, he has to prepare in case the system interferes. That's why he needs her. Lin is the strongest and best player, with such great abilities that even the gods fought to see her. She's the purest elite of humanity. He hands the egg to Lin, and she finds it beautiful. But she asks, calling Sehen an old man, if the egg was going to hatch right then. He confirms, but asks if he really looks that old. Mina starts teasing him since he really is 10 years older than her. She asks if, by any chance, he wants to be called Appa, and she herself should already be calling him an old man since he's 4 years older than her. It was just a little joke, but my friends, behind her, you can see only the shadow of death, the incarnation of hatred and fear, wanting to rip Mina's soul out. Poor Mystic even starts trembling trembling as Jisoo radiates this murderous aura and asks what she had just said. Mina insists it was just a joke and asks if they were going back to Daejeon. Sehen replies that no, they wouldn't be able to finish the raid at that moment. The mystic is confused since they hadn't even started yet, but according to Jisoo, they had already located the boss. She's shocked by this information and asks why they didn't tell her what they were doing. After a long explanation, she finally realizes this raid is extremely difficult. Until now, she thought it was something like the Sentinels, but Sehen explains that in terms of combat ability, the Sentinels would be harder. However, bosses have far greater physical strength and resistance, which makes them much harder to kill. Additionally, their range of action is much larger, which makes them incomparable in terms of damage and danger. Even though it would be better to finish sooner rather than later, it's still too early, and the other players aren't ready. Or still, there's another variable in play since our protagonist doesn't know if the tiger was stabbed by the Kylan's horn in the previous life. He wonders if this was a change in events just because he went to Daejeon. He had never gone there before, yet the tiger ambushed them as if it had been waiting. Thinking about it now, it was very obvious. The traces were exactly as if they had been lured. The Kylan and Xiong Qi fought far too early. It hadn't even been 3 days since the raids were announced. The more he thinks about this situation, the more confused he gets. It might even be the system trying to mess with our protagonist. In the middle of these thoughts, we suddenly shift to the perspective of this bastard controlling the system. He's impressed that the protagonist managed to dodge the tiger so easily. He really isn't just some ordinary guy. Moreover, he got the Kylan egg from inside the dungeon, but he shouldn't be able to hatch it. Regardless, he wonders why the tiger is so weak, all battered just because it got stabbed by the Kylan. Even after letting it absorb energy from the horn, it's still limping. He concludes that to cover this weakness, he needs to increase the tiger's adaptability and regeneration. That little tiger is going to become a terrifying beast if he manages it. Skipping to 2 weeks after all of this, we jump straight to the city center. We see someone quite interesting and Sehen recognizes him too. It's him, Park Dong-gwan. When our protagonist calls out to him, the poor guy even tries to hide under his hood, wondering why they're there. Going back a little in time, we see the protagonist walking with Jisoo through the city, watching the military working. Jisoo asks why the hell the police and the military are even there if they're not going to accomplish anything. The protagonist explains that it's probably because last time they felt they didn't perform well due to the sudden attack. However, Jisoo already knows that weapons don't work on monsters, or rather, they work a little but not enough to cause real harm. Against the boss, they're completely useless. Jisoo says they could just rely on the players, but the more they rely on them, the more power they hand over to the players, and they wouldn't want to lose what they've gained once the world returns to normal. For now, they decide to head to where the other players are, and there are far more players there than in the protagonist's past life. Some people are shouting, looking for a healer, others begging for anyone with healing abilities. Amid this crowd, someone approaches and asks if our protagonist wants to join them. Even though he says he has no intention of joining any group, the crazy guy just says he's trying to act tough for Jisoo and warns that he'll end up getting himself killed if he keeps acting like that. In the end, the one actually trying to act tough for Jisoo was this crazy guy, but he doesn't know this little psychopath. The crazy guy tells one of his friends that the protagonist will come to his senses after taking a hit. Ignoring these randoms, the protagonist talks to our goddess, and she's already drawn her weapon, saying people like him should learn their place, and asks if she should go take care of him. But of course, our protagonist stops her from beating the poor guy to a pulp. The protagonist knows that when the raid begins, they'll be the first to die. Suddenly, he notices that Park Dong-gwan is there and approaches him, asking where Junhyun is and most importantly, if he's keeping the contract he made with him. All nervous, Park responds that Junhyun went to Chinonju because he was worried about his family, and Park ended up there because he received a call. The protagonist notices Park's items and realizes that he probably did very well in the third mission and must have acquired some very good skills. However, he still has a long way to go to obtain the complete victory skill, which can't be obtained through conventional means but has a very interesting effect. The protagonist begins to explain that an avatar can only obtain a skill through their god, and that's why it's so problematic, since gods don't give out skills easily depending on their effect. The instructions Park received to go to Daejeon probably came from Yunhyun or from Honest Life. We then shift to a chat where the commander of Greece asks what the guy who killed Karis is doing. The anonymous participants start replying with guesses like he must be sleeping and some bet that he went to kill the Daejeon boss raid. The gods are talking amongst themselves, and even Jester comments that she wished her avatar had gone with him, but she refused. Mina never fails. They make a few more irrelevant comments. They're basically trying to figure out who the protagonist is. The protagonist, who was reading the chat, thinks she might be talking about the Killen fruit, but he doesn't need to worry about her leaking information since she also wants to know more than he does about all of this. Luke's goddess is very good at keeping secrets, so everything will be fine. Returning to the conversation with Park, the protagonist asks if he's already learned to use the instigation skill and if he could use it now. Park says he hasn't learned it yet. However, since our protagonist already knows he's lying, he makes a small threat that immediately makes Park confess. Through a crow, the protagonist notices the ground moving towards them and tells Park to use the instigation skill at that very moment, otherwise everyone is going to die. We see that beneath the ground that tiger was moving towards them, attempting a surprise attack after hiding. The protagonist already knew this might happen, but if the tiger was going to fight players, it wouldn't need to be stealthy. The answer is simple, it just wanted a quick snack before the real fight. The protagonist shouts for everyone to get out of there because the raid is about to start, but of course no one listens to him since there are still 10 minutes before the boss is supposed to appear. People start mocking him, saying he should learn to read a clock. The protagonist just warns them again that they'll all die if they don't move. While they keep talking among themselves and ignoring the warning, the protagonist asks if Park is going to use his ability. However, his ability isn't that simple to use, it requires a trigger. He needs to understand people's mindset to use it on them, otherwise it would just be hypnosis and not true instigation. Since that's the case, Sen tells Jisoo to get her weapon ready, and when he gives the signal, she's supposed to attack the street right in front of the hydrant with all her strength. He'll help her attack together, and he asks Park to use his ability on the crowd as soon as possible to make them retreat as far back as they can. Finally, he warns that the area is about to become a war zone. And sure enough, while he pulls out a massive thunder spear, apparently straight out of Attack on Titan, he waits as there are only 5 seconds left before the boss appears. Even from a distance, the entire ground begins to shake, leaving the hesitant people confused since the raid hadn't even started yet. At 0, the tiger's massive paw bursts from the ground, trying to hit the protagonist, who uses the thunder spear to repel the attack. Jisoo follows his orders and lands a massive blow on the tiger's paw, forcing it to slam into the ground. The protagonist is confused as to why the tiger came from underground when it has wings. What irritates him even more is that this group of idiots keeps wondering why the beast is already there. It wasn't supposed to arrive yet. Even worse, the military starts attacking with their weapons, firing tank shells non-stop at the creature's paw. The platoon leader even thinks this will kill the tiger. But in the end, the tiger just rises without a single scratch. Apparently, something has changed. It has undergone a transformation. From what the protagonist can tell, it has become a sacrament. Basically, they'll need to treat it as something on the same level as a sentinel. In short, they're screwed. It was already hard to deal with before when it was much weaker than a sentinel, and now that it's as strong as one, they're utterly screwed. You wonder if it really managed to absorb all the power of the horn, and it becomes clear that an admin must have gotten involved in this, most likely at Catters. The tiger begins attacking everyone, and even though it's clear it's not doing anything, the soldiers continue shooting at it. Even though the protagonist had warned them beforehand that Idiot Park still hadn't used his skill. When he asks him again to use it, he truly questions whether that was the right moment, and when he finally uses it, he orders them to leave the monster behind and evacuate since modern weapons were completely useless. The protagonist thinks that the other players probably had an idea about the 4th mission at that moment, and they all start motivating themselves, saying that the bigger the monster, the easier it is to hit it, so they should attack immediately. But just as he finishes his sentence, he almost gets struck by a paw swipe that would have taken at least half of him if it connected. Thanks to the protagonist who kicked him out of the way, the player thanks him for saving his life. Meanwhile, Sehen begins storing away the tunneler since it's too slow to be used against the tiger, and a spear would be better. The players are complaining that it's extremely difficult to approach the tiger because of its feather-like needles. Long-range attacks are also useless since its fur is too resistant for mana arrows. They even question whether killing it is truly possible. Our protagonist knows that it is possible to organize themselves to kill it without anyone dying, but the tiger is about to evolve into its adult form at any moment, so they don't have time for that. And when the great tiger starts flying, it scares the players even more, who start wondering if it can really fly. Come on man, the thing has wings and you're asking if it can fly? That's just ridiculous. The players complain about how they should attack if it's flying and wonder if they should just try to dodge. A single paw strike from that height wouldn't just kill them but would also sweep the city away. And running away isn't an option since the whole city would disappear from the map because of this creature, and there's nothing they can do. But of course, Sehen wasn't going to let that happen. To prevent it, he just needed to bring the tiger down before it decided to attack. Compared to Kara's, the tiger was practically stationary, so it would be easy. With that in mind, the protagonist uses the chains from his inventory along with a spear to directly hit its wings, piercing both. He then shouts for all the players to start pulling the chains because they needed to stop it from diving. They only started helping after noticing that Jisoo had stepped in to assist. With everyone's combined strength, they managed to pull Cheong Kai down and everyone starts attacking simultaneously as soon as it hits the ground. The problem is that the transformation was already happening, and it was evolving into its adult form. The protagonist had to kill it at that exact moment, or they were SQRGOED. In his last attempt, he attacked with the tunneler, but unfortunately, he couldn't even pierce the tiger. It was much more resistant than he had imagined. While he was in shock, She-Goat took responsibility and drew a dagger. The problem was that she stabbed herself to maximize the effects of the Heavenly Assassin's physical skill. Since the effect accumulates based on how long the dagger stays in her heart, she keeps healing while enduring the pain, a literal auto-damage farm. Yori knew she had learned from someone strong, but didn't expect it to be Venetius 13. She leaped over the tiger and simply descended in a dive, relentlessly pummeling the tiger without giving it a chance to breathe. breathe. To try to shake her off, the tiger slammed its head into the ground, but she pulled out a hammer, and just like Zoyo, delivered a blow to the tiger's head that even made me dizzy. In the end, the tiger lunged forward with its mouth wide open, practically swallowing her whole, which deeply worried our protagonist. The only problem for the little tiger is that he can't just try to eat something just because it's near his mouth. He can actually fit Jisoo entirely in his mouth. The only issue is that he hasn't fully managed to do so, and from inside his mouth, she starts punching. The kitten simply falls to the side, leaving everyone confused about why he collapsed. From inside the tiger's head, our goddess simply steps out, waving to our protagonist after dusting herself off. She approached, saying it was to be expected that he would die after having his brain torn to pieces. We then move directly to the chat in the Daejeon region, where several beings are talking to each other, most of them impressed with what was happening and above all, that they had managed to kill the tiger. Honest Life started bragging that his avatar had been very useful in the battle. This made others ask if it was our protagonist or Jisoo, but when he replied that it was the guy who just evacuated everyone, they all started mocking him. Even the commander of Greece was considering making Jisoo his avatar from the beginning. The problem is that if she was already this strong, a god had probably already chosen her. They also discussed how the boss's stats were abnormally high, and that if they had delayed a little longer, the entire region would have been destroyed. They even suspect that an admin was involved because otherwise it wouldn't make sense. This leads them to question why an admin would intervene, and the most likely reason was the kid who killed Karis. Mask guy number 48 asks if they should make an offer to the protagonists and questions whether they felt underestimated because if they had ignored the issue, the boss would have wiped them all out. Lemon Juice, one of the participants in the conversation, says they should think about such things from the beginning, so they shouldn't waste time chatting and instead come up with a well-thought-out plan. Honest Life blames his server for being the least popular in Hackers. As they argue, we see that number 48 is none other than like the VIDO. Just kidding, it's Sihan. After this detail caused by the protagonist, the Akator's administrator can no longer interfere with the South Korean server. Back on the battlefield, everyone was calming down and the protagonist and Jisoo sat together, looking at the rewards they received for defeating the boss. The protagonist received a Cheong Kai hide, and it was incredibly lucky that he had evolved into a sacrament right before being finished off by our goddess. Jisoo received an item similar to his, a black marble of the sinister saint, and an incredibly powerful weapon could be crafted from it. The problem is that it's almost impossible for them at the moment since they lack the necessary materials. Jisoo offers it to our protagonist since she only delivered the final blow. He tells her she can keep it since it will be more useful to her later when she has the materials, and she was the one who received it. Since everyone contributed, the reward was shared, and gold ranking is more than enough. She mentions that she also earned gold, and Park, butting in, says he got silver. The protagonist complains, questioning how Park got silver when all he did was run away. Park explains that he got silver because he led everyone out and created space for them to fight. They end up ignoring Park, and Jisoo asks if the protagonist got a lower rank because she got in his way. But it's the opposite. If it weren't for her, he would have had to fight much longer to try to kill the tiger. Setting that aside, the protagonist asks if Park plans to do anything at that moment. Trying to escape, Park says he will, so the protagonist tells him it's better if he keeps avoiding mistakes if he wants to stay alive. The protagonist then invites Jisoo to return to Seoul. She asks if they really should leave so soon, and he asks if she has anything left to do there. She doesn't, but if her mother calls, she might have something. The problem is she only spoke to her mother once, and her mother never said where she was. This leaves the protagonist deep in thought. In a world where you could die at any moment, Jisoo's own mother doesn't want to see her, knowing her daughter could simply vanish at any moment without even saying goodbye. Furthermore, the stronger Jisoo gets, the more he wonders. If he hadn't let her die in the past life, how different could things have been? She died early on and didn't even get a chance to show a fraction of her potential. This is an exclusive achievement of our protagonist. The fact that she's alive proves he can truly reshape fate. As they start walking, we see behind them a different eye among the other observers. Its iris is red with golden details, staring intensely at our protagonist and Jisoo. In a place perhaps far away, we see another scene unfolding. A group of men is dragging tied-up children, yelling at them. One of them tells the kids to enjoy it while they're still being nice, threatening to kill the next one who cries. They had essentially captured people hiding inside a school. Their bosses had only instructed them to take the kids to a certain location, without sharing any other relevant information. One of them even asks if they won't need the children's souls or blood, considering they're demons. While they talk, someone mocks them, saying the two ladies have time to chat. Another man mentions he went to catch some nosy kids sneaking around. When they ask who the intruder is, he casually admits he doesn't know. Since he doesn't know them, he can simply kill them all because they aren't important, and that's exactly what he does. They try to run, but he massacres them effortlessly, finishing with a cold remark to the corpses. You shouldn't underestimate the Black Cloak group. Returning directly to Shinram, our dear Mina, accompanied by Lin, was walking through the city, and the little girl was expressing her gratitude because, thanks to the points she had earned with Mina, she could do many other things. They had achieved gold rank, and it seemed they were facing a boss. Mina thanked the grimoire that the protagonist had given her, but Lin was afraid that her father or Mina herself might get hurt. While Mina started bragging that everything was under control and there was nothing to worry about, Lin shouted for her to be careful, and thanks to the warning, she managed to dodge a hammer strike. As soon as she evaded it, she turned and punched the bastard in the face, knocking him backward. Apparently, they were from the same group that kidnaps children. They decided to attack all at once, and the man who took Mina's punch had his eye color change, which led her to think he was a humanoid monster. They must have thought they were easy targets because they were children. While they complained about her being an avatar, she transformed her arms into mantis claws and warned them that it was a mithril-coated mantis scythe. In the next scene, she shredded their weapons and those idiots. Since they couldn't hit the older girl, they all decided to gang up on the younger one. Mina started running desperately to help her but couldn't reach in time. However, Lin simply started dodging all the attacks. Taking advantage of this, Mina mercilessly beat everyone who had attacked her. After being shamefully beaten, they all started fleeing, leaving everything behind. Mina thanked Lin for being okay, but also asked how she did that. Lin simply said she copied Mina's movements. Ignoring it for now since Lin was fine, Mina noticed that the blood of those men was dark. Since Sehan was returning that day, she planned to show it to him. When the protagonist arrived, Mina told him everything that had happened, how she had been attacked by that sick group, emphasizing the black blood. Every time she cut them, instead of normal blood, only dark liquid came out. Sehan thought about the situation and why they were after the two girls. He concluded that they were likely from the Black Cloak group, who were essentially puppets of demons, but they should have been quiet at that moment since their vanguard was still small, and it wasn't safe for them to act. However, Sehan suspected it was because Kim Ju-won's group was no longer active there. In his past life, Kim's group left no room for the Black Cloak group to grow. But in this life, the Black Cloak group had more influence since Kim's group had been completely wiped out. It could also have happened because Sehan had allowed demons into Seoul. One way or another, it was his fault. Lin asked if the protagonist knew who they were, and he confirmed that he did. When Luke asked who they were, Sehan said there was a strong chance they were demons. The biggest problem at that moment was finding out where they were staying. Jisoo joined the conversation, saying she might know where they were. She asked if Sehan remembered her saying that her third mission wasn't easy, but was extremely painful. During that mission, she fought a man with black blood. At the time, she thought it was just an ability, but if it was for a demonic reason, as Sehan suggested, it was different. The protagonist had no doubt they were demonic puppets and was even more surprised that Jisoo had killed most of them, although a few remnants remained. He asked her to take them there. Sehan went directly to the location in Hwagokdong, Gangseogu, in Seoul. The protagonist noticed people opening shops in that area. Even though he thought it was dangerous, they didn't have much choice, since the world wouldn't return to normal anytime soon. He approached a random person who quickly noticed he was a player because of his clothes. The person quickly informed him that the merchandise wasn't ready yet, but Sehan only wanted to ask one thing: if there had been any kidnappings in that area. Clearly, the people who overheard became very nervous, and the man he was speaking to tried to change the subject, saying he didn't know and that Sehan shouldn't ask such questions. The protagonist still wasn't sure if this was the right place, so he began asking the man again, but the man had nothing more to say. Sehan persisted and showed a picture of Jisoo, asking if he knew that girl. The man started sweating and told the protagonist to get that cursed image away from him. Sehan said he knew her well. The man relented, saying he would tell Sehan what he wanted to know if he put the image away. But since there were too many people in the street, they needed to go inside to talk properly. Once inside, the man explained that the people doing the kidnappings were the ones controlling that area. He said the area had been free of gangs because of the woman in the photos Sehan had shown. She had simply eliminated everyone there. The protagonist finally understood what Jisoo had been doing there. He didn't know how she got involved in all of this, but thanks to her wiping out all the gangs, the Black Cloak group had established themselves and managed to dominate the area. The man continued, saying they had started kidnapping children not long ago and threatened to kill everyone if they spoke up about it. Our protagonist finally concluded that if they were taking so many children, they could only be after one thing: the Mask of Lament. The protagonist begins explaining that it's not just the gods who use this world as entertainment. There are other types of entities who have set foot in this world, and they are the demons. In the case of the gods, they take control of at most 2 people, as this makes it easier to manage their avatars, allowing them to assist and interfere significantly. The demons, however, are the complete opposite. They take control of a large number of people whom they use as puppets, and others to whom they share power, called contractors. In some cases, even an entire guild can be affiliated with a demon since they don't seek potential or connection. The only thing they seek is the desire for power. They specifically look for people weak to temptation and who listen well to their words. Beyond that, they don't care about anything else. For them, unlike the gods, this isn't a game but a harmful reality for humans. The Mask of Lament, which the protagonist mentioned they are after, is the face of a demon that contains condensed resentment. The owner of this mask is a high-ranking demon, Nemiros of rank 27, a being of such high status that he can be compared to Keras. He grows stronger by absorbing human sadness and life. Sadness is given to him in the form of points, and he can project this power on the same level as the constellations themselves. The protagonist simply thanks the old man for sharing this information and wishes him good sales. However, he is now certain of one thing: the ones controlling the group of demonic puppets are the Black Cloak group. This means they are undoubtedly involved with the demon Neburos, and his task is simply to exterminate the Black Cloak group. Using the information the old man provided, he uses a body to scout areas near white buildings, the locations where they are known to hide. The problem is that in all the white buildings, everyone has black hair and eyes, making it difficult to identify them. To find their main mask, he needs to locate their leader and eliminate him completely. While walking through the city, a large group of people arrives and begins surrounding him. They ask if he's part of a group to be acting this way. Our protagonist has already killed a number of demonic people, and these newcomers ask if he is from the Crescent Moon Guild. However, he doesn't even know what this guild is. He thinks that ever since the scene was dissolved, many criminal guilds have started forming, and one of them is probably Crescent Moon. The protagonist simply replies that they don't need to know who he is since none of them will leave there alive. As soon as he finishes speaking, the men start getting irritated, calling him names, but with raven eyes, he interrupts their vision and begins attacking relentlessly, taking them all down in an instant. The survivors start chasing him, but he isn't focused on them. Instead, he's trying to locate where the children are hidden. However, since he finds nothing, he decides to deal with the men first and then resume the hunt, as they are so weak they're nothing but rotten meat. And so it happens. The protagonist effortlessly takes out everyone there, and in the next scene, we see him opening the cage where the children are imprisoned. One of the children is crying and another asks if they will be taken to another location, mentioning they were promised they would become players. But it's impossible to become a player through mundane methods. Of course, the child didn't know this. Since they weren't going to turn them into players, the child asked to be let go. The protagonist was already planning to do so, knowing that Neburo's group isn't the only one involved. He takes the children outside and assures them that he has already dealt with all the men who brought them there, so they don't need to worry. The protagonist finds it strange to imagine a reality where so many children want to become players, but that isn't important. Now that he's rescued them, he can finally focus on the main objective and head straight to the 7th floor, where the branch manager is located. Upon arriving, we see that man from earlier in a small area surrounded by cages, probably holding more children. In the middle of the room is that mask, locked inside another cage. While observing the mask, one of his subordinates arrives, yelling about a problem. The Huagokdong branch has been annihilated. The man, logically alarmed, asks who is responsible. The subordinate reveals it wasn't a group of people, but just one person. Reviewing the security cameras, they only saw Seihan dressed in black. However, they couldn't confirm fully as there were too many ravens blocking the camera views. The man wonders if our protagonist could be another demonic puppet since many people are targeting the Black Cloak group. But a raven? That's something new. With the situation becoming more complicated, the man asks where Hyungnim is. He learns Hyungnim went directly to the 5th floor to talk to the leader of the Black Cloak gang, Kang Xianwoo. Kang was already aware that someone had wiped out the Huagokdong branch and directly orders this strange man to personally handle the situation and teach Seihan a lesson. Kang says he will leave the entire situation in this man's hands and advises him not to let his guard down since the protagonist seems quite formidable. Heading towards the location, this man reflects that there were over 50 people in Huagokdong, and our protagonist isn't just anyone. However, unfortunately for him, Neburos himself said there isn't a contractor stronger than him at the moment, so the protagonist is tangled with the wrong person, at least according to him. The protagonist was looking at some papers, and according to their coordinates, the base is located in the center of Incheon. Finding the exact spot described in the document is quite easy. The problem is that there are many observers following him. Even Jester, who was supposed to focus on her avatar, was trailing him. The protagonist complains, saying he'll try not to mess up since it's quite difficult to make a stealth attack with so many observers around. He thinks it's truly annoying to attract the attention of the gods, but something shocks him, that strange eye with the red iris. He recognizes it as the observer of the witches, but if it's like in his past life, they must have already chosen their avatars. The most important thing at that moment is to think about how you will fight against them since their numbers are much greater compared to Huagokdong. If there are really that many of them, it will be problematic even for him. Jester's eye approaches with a written phrase asking if there really isn't another way. However, our protagonist decides to save the children underground first since they are planning to use the children to awaken the Mask of Lamentation. Down in the underground facility, the protagonist has somehow already managed to arrive. He observes some people talking, complaining that the children are dying too quickly and asking if they couldn't at least endure for 2 days. Because of this, they'll need more children since the Huagokdong branch was destroyed. The protagonist wonders if he arrived too late and continues listening to the complaints of these men who question if they could simply leave the bodies there. But they have no idea since it's usually Commander Shin Ja-woon who disposes of them. The protagonist wonders if there was such a guy in his past life, but he doesn't remember anyone by that name. He realizes there's nothing more to listen to from these scumbags. The protagonist reveals himself, and as soon as he appears, they panic asking who he is. But judging by the way he's dressed, they probably assume he's a rookie. When they ask him to help dispose of the body, the two men are instantly sliced into countless pieces, their remains falling with a foul stench. He approaches the poor child's body, thinking about how the Mask of Lamentation absorbs sadness. When a person dies with their sorrow absorbed, they die in lamentation. Therefore, the expression on their face shouldn't be so peaceful. The power the mask has accumulated so far is much less than he expected. If the mask had truly absorbed the vital energy of all those children for 2 weeks, according to the document he read back in Huagokdong, it would be much more powerful powerful than it is now. Next to the child's face, he notices a sphere releasing gas. After a certain amount of time, every living being within its radius enters a state of asphyxiation. It's basically an item. The protagonist wonders if one of the contractors or puppets is trying to save the children. But regardless of their motives, the priority is to get the children out of there. In Chief Kang's office, he asks if they really haven't found out who did it yet. The subordinate with him replies that they haven't found anything since Jae-woon was searching for the protagonist's traces, but he left nothing behind. The chief is visibly furious, saying he'll ask Neburos to wait a little longer since it will take some time to get more children. Kang begins to question whether the protagonist might be another demonic puppet since he wears black clothes and has control. But even if he is another demonic puppet or even a contractor, he wouldn't be able to defeat Kang. The subordinate starts planting wrong ideas in the leader's head about Shin Jae-woon, saying that if he ever changed his mind, they would have a huge problem. But Kang assures him that even if he gives off that impression, he thinks of Jae-woon as an older brother. He would never try to betray him. But that's not important right now, and if he wanted to, he could keep an eye on him. The problem arises when he looks out the window and sees a massive swarm of crows approaching. They simply break through the window, and when they notice, the crows have bombs strapped to their feet. The bombs detonate simultaneously in several locations throughout the building. We then cut directly to Jae-woon, who is receiving the news that the entire base has been attacked. The leader reports that the mask was buried because the building was blown up. They initially thought the man who attacked them had come for the mask, but he only took the children and left the mask as it was. He probably knows that no one can destroy the mask if it's connected to a deity or a demon. Jae-woon complains that there's no way Kang could have died so easily since he was a demon contractor. But even though he's a contractor, his body was still human. Finally, the person speaking to Jae-woon understands the situation and explains that some time ago, the star of the crows changed because someone killed the original crow star and absorbed his powers. Technically, the person doesn't have enough status to claim the position of crow star, so it remains vacant. He is currently one of the most famous players, and since he's a demon, he cannot enter the community of the gods. But he has his ways, and he says the protagonist is still at the base, checking for survivors. The only thing Jae-woon asks is if he has friends. Since Sehen isn't someone who fights openly, he wouldn't face him head-on even in battle. Therefore, Jae-woon needs to create a situation where Sehen cannot hide. With this, he asks where the protagonist's friends are, as that must be where his base is. Neburos doesn't recommend a fight between the two since Jae-woon doesn't stand a chance, but there's still a way. Even though it's incomplete, if Jae-woon uses that mask, he'll be able to have a fair fight with his body. In fact, he might even be capable of winning. Even though he doesn't like it, he's not in a position to say yes or no. Jae-woon agrees and asks to be taken to the mask. Even Neburos warns him to be careful since the Demon of Lamentation will lead him to victory. This mask, with its strange and turbulent presence, feels eerie. Just as Jae-woon is about to put it on, the scene shifts directly to a cafe where the protagonist's friends are. Through the door, we see him entering, with the light obscuring his body.